This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Everybody ready to begin?
Yes.
All right. So I will now call the City Council, Los Banos City Council meeting of January 6th, 2021 to order. Our primary comments here, first comments, temporary public comment email established for the City of Los Banos City Council meeting of January 6th, 2021. Emails must be received by 4 p.m. The city has established a temporary email address citizens can use to email public comments on any agenda item, limited to 250 words or less. Any public comments received by January 6th, prior to 4 p.m. will be read aloud during the appropriate time and agenda item. The email address is cityclerk, all lowercase, at losbanos.org. Public comment during public hearings will be taken in real time via email. Once the public hearing is opened, the City Council will pause the meeting in order to receive emails directed at the public hearing, up to 250 words, and will read comments into the record after resuming the meeting as time permits. Please indicate that comments are for a particular public hearing by putting public hearing in the subject line of the email and the title of the public hearing. The council chambers are closed to the public. Those interested in viewing the City Council meeting can do so on the City of Los Banos website on YouTube. We have our various assistance that you need, if you need, and that's posted in the agenda. So now I will go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we will begin with Pledge of Allegiance led by Police Chief Breezy.
Thank you, Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I choke up almost every time I say that. Now we will go to roll call. City Clerk Maloney.
Jones.
Present.
Lambert.
Here.
Lewis.
All right, here.
Faria.
Here. We have a quorum. Next, we'll move on to the consideration of the approval of the agenda. Staff is requesting that item 15, the COVID-19 status update, be moved up on the agenda to be heard after item 7, if we have our special guest in for at that time. After item 7 is the consent agenda. And so Chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda with the change of the COVID-19 status moved up after item 7. Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I motion that we move item 15 status after the consideration, or before the consideration, item number 7.
Okay, and would you also include approval of the agenda with that change?
And approval with the agenda, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Before the consent agenda or after the consent agenda, Mr. Lambert?
It was before the consent agenda, after the consent. Okay, that would be after, Mayor, after the consent agenda.
After the consent agenda. So I have a motion to approve the agenda with the change of the COVID-19 status update to be heard after item 7. Do I have a second?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lewis, I'll second the motion.
Thank you. I have a motion by Councilmember Lambert, second by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis. Roll call votes. City Clerk Maloney.
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Faria,
Yes. Moving on now to the proclamations. I'm looking to see who is with us today online. Mr. Gary Munoz from our school board. Mr. John Cates is with us today as well. I don't see any others of those who need to be recognized at this time. What I'm going to do is read what the proclamation will say. If we were in person, we'd do each one of these and hand each one individually. But with this online, it's not so beautiful. So to bring the beauty of the certificate to everyone's attention, City Clerk Maloney will hold that up for a little bit so everybody can see it. And here is what the proclamation will read. Whereas said city commission members were appointed to serve their terms on various city commissions, Airport Advisory Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, Planning Commission, Measure H Citizens Oversight Committee, and Measure P Committee. And whereas these city commission members faithfully attended regular meetings of their commissions, and whereas these city commission members were dedicated and continually provided their support to the goals and missions of the commissions. And whereas these city commission members fulfilled their terms as members of the city commissions on December 31st, 2020. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the mayor and city council members of the city of Los Banos do hereby recognize and commend these city commission members for their dedicated service. And they are David Anderson, Airport Advisory Commission, Gary Munoz, Parks and Recreation Commission, John Cates, Planning Commission, Susan Toscano, Planning Commission, Michael Amabile, Measure H Committee, John Cates, Measure H Committee, James Roloff's Measure H Committee, Deborah DJ Barcelos, Measure P Committee, and Diana Thurston, Measure P Committee. In witness thereof, we have signed. So therefore be it proclaimed that the mayor and city council members of the city of Los Banos do hereby recognize and commend these city commission members for their dedicated service. Thank you so much for your service, and thank you for joining us tonight. If we had everybody together, we'd have a round of applause. So let's do that. We can't do this work without, thank you so much. We can't do this work without everybody involved. So thanks for coming tonight, and we'll be, I believe we're mailing those out. Take care, and thanks again for joining us. We will now move on to the public forum. Members of the public may address the city council members on any item of public interest that is within the jurisdiction of the city council. This includes agenda and non-agenda items. No action will be taken on non-agenda items. Speakers may submit their comments by submitting a written statement limited to 250 words or less, by dropping it off in the utility payment box at City Hall, 520 J Street, by mail or email at cityclerk@losbanos.org. Comments received will be read into the record during the city council meeting. City Clerk Maloney, do we have any comments by email?
I've received 2 comments by email, but they have to do with number 8, the public hearing regarding the complete streets plans.
Okay, so we'll wait until number 8 to have those read at the public hearing time. So seeing no more speakers or letters in the public forum, we'll move on to item 7, is the consideration of the approval of the consent agenda. City Clerk Maloney, could you please read those items for us?
Items on the consent agenda are as follows. Warrant numbers 224982 through 225229 in the amount of $942,804.74. Minutes for the December 16th, 2020 special city council meeting. City Council Resolution number 6300, accepting public improvements for Dove Hollow Villages at Stone Creek 7, Phase 2B, Anderson Homes. City Council Resolution number 6301, accepting the Las Banos Dog Park project as complete and authorizing the filing of a notice of completion with the Merced County Recorder. City Council Resolution number 6302, adopting a revised budget for the 2020-2021 fiscal year as it pertains to expenditures for the City of Las Banos website refresh project in the amount of $16,740. City Council Resolution number 6303, authorizing the city manager to execute amendment number 5 to the landscape maintenance services contract between the City of Las Banos and Ronnie's Inc., and adopting a revised budget for the fiscal year 2020-2021 as it pertains to the general fund for maintenance account in the amount of $4,500. And the items are to be approved as submitted.
Thank you. Any member of the city council wish to pull an item from the consent agenda for either discussion or for a separate vote?
Mayor, I'd like
Yes.
to pull item E.
Item E, and this is Mr. Jones.
That is correct.
Mr. Jones will ask to pull item E. Is that for discussion or separate vote?
Discussion.
Discussion only. Thank you. Does anyone else on the council have any items they would like to pull for discussion or a separate vote?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lewis, I'd like to pull item D and item F.
Item D and item F. And that's Ms. Mayor Pro Tem Lewis. For discussion or separate vote?
On both of them for a separate vote.
Separate vote on both. Okay. Very good. Any other items from any other council members? If not, do I have a motion? Mayor Pro Tem Lewis, since you were last on there, would you like to make the motion with the exclusions of D, E, and F?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted minus letters D, E, and F for separate consideration.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Mayor, this is Brett. I'll second that.
Yes. Thank you. So I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis and a second by Councilmember Jones to approve the consent agenda minus items D, E, and F. Roll call vote, City Clerk Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Faria.
Yes. Thank you. So we will go ahead and take these in the order that they've been submitted by staff. So item D will take us to our acting public works director and city engineer, Mr. Pezesh. Is Mr. Pezesh in this evening? There he is.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I can get my system to work here. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, the item that was pulled for discussion here is for the council to authorize the acceptance of the dog park project as complete and authorizing the filing of a notice of completion. The project has been under construction for several months. It was actually completed. The construction was completed a couple of months ago, and based on contract, we had a 60-day roll period to see how the plants, the grass, and everything else that's been installed is surviving and showing signs of growth, and we are satisfied that there is enough growth in what is installed to accept the 60-day period and call this a completed project. So with that, the legal process is for us to file a notice of completion, and based on that, we can go ahead and release the retention for the contractor. So that is the item before you at this point.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis, did you have questions of Mr.
Yes.
Pazesh?
The question I had, and the last time I was there, the grass was still in some growth, and it appeared that there was some bogging in areas where the ground wasn't level enough. And the concern that I have is whether or not that had been repaired, because as dogs are running through there and having fun, their nails are going to dig up through that turf, and we're going to have a big mess out there.
Yes. And if I may direct that to Mr. Joe Heim, our Parks and Rec Operations Manager. I haven't been to the site for a couple of weeks. Mr. Heim?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Turn it up a little bit. So the final inspection was completed in December, the 26th, and prior to that, there was some work done to the turf areas regarding. If you go out there today, for example, you'll see some areas that have been reseeded. From that, the area isn't going to be perfectly level because there are drainage. They have a slope for drainage now. It's minor slopes, obviously. Difficult to see unless you are kind of looking at it specifically. But it's not going to be perfectly flat. But the areas that I think you might be referencing in terms of little dips and things like that were addressed last inspection.
Okay, and that your last statement was what my concerns would be about are dips and bogs in certain areas. Not that it's sloped, because actually you're going to want that drainage off the grass and water not sitting there. But in some of our parks, like the linear flyover, there are areas that have a lot of bogging, and when people are walking through, and I see people out there with their animals, you can sink into those bog areas. So I just want to make sure that that's cleared up. And, if we have that problem again, who's going to be responsible? If that comes up, once that dog park opens, whose responsibility is it to fix it? Is it in the contract for the contractor to repair it, or does our public works department have to go out and do that?
There is a performance bond for a period of 1 year that's basically used for this type of maintenance. So for a year, we can actually go back to the contractor and have the contractor fix these items if there are workmanship or construction issues that is associated with their work. So what is being released at this point is the retention. So every time they ask for payment for the work that they have completed, we retain 5%. So at this point, we pay them full amount basically by releasing the 5%. But their bond remains for a period of 1 year. So during that year, issues come up, fence comes loose, and we say, okay, they didn't tie it down properly. It is theirs. They have to come back and fix that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Lewis, would you like to make the motion to approve item D?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will. I'd like to make a motion to approve item letter D on the consent agenda as submitted.
Do I have a second?
Mayor, I'll second that.
Okay, I think I got Mr. Lambert on the second. So I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis and a second by Council Member Lambert to approve item D on the consent agenda. City Clerk Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Roll call vote. Very good.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Faria.
Yes. Thank you. We'll move on to item E. And that item was asked to be pulled by Councilmember Jones. So I'll send it over to Councilmember Jones. And that
Yes, it's exciting to hear that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead. Mr. Jones, I'll let you address that first,
Okay.
and then staff.
Okay, so it's exciting to hear that we're finally going to get a new website. Reviewing the agenda, we didn't see like a completion date or an expected completion date where that will be live. Just seeing if we have a time frame on that.
So we don't have an actual time frame as of yet. It will be before the end of the fiscal year in constructing this. But once we fine tune the agreement, because we're going to use the professional service agreement that we usually use for city of Los Banos functions, and this is one of them that we would use it for. So once this gets approved and we send that to them, we'll include a time frame in there. But in talking with Mid Valley IT, once we get up and going, it'll probably take us 2 to 3 months. But I've been guaranteed that if we start this project now in January or February, that it will be finished by the end of this fiscal year, which means no later than June. But we'll dial that down
great.
and have an
I have
actual time frame with the scope of services.
Okay, excellent. I have several more questions.
Okay.
Will council have any say in what information will be on there? Like if we like a certain look or feel, will there be any samples or templates that we might be able to choose from, or is it all going to be staff only?
And the way that we have it built out, it's staff only, but I'm sure that we can probably bring something back to provide to council in between. We could build that into the time frame for the scope of services with maybe 1 or 2 options that staff hadn't kind of nailed it down to. If that's what the council prefers.
So at that time we can look at there's any sample websites that we can look at to kind of get an idea of what the look and feel may be. Would that be correct?
Yes, and they actually have sent us several websites that they've already, different cities that they've worked with. So I'd be more than happy to send the list of those websites out to council so they can see what kind of work they've done in the past.
Please do. Excellent. And do we have any new high quality photos for the website?
We haven't started any of this, so at this point in time, no.
Okay, I would like to make sure that we're using as many new photos as possible to try to keep it up to date and fresh. That is it. You answered all my questions, so thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, before you call for a vote, I do have a couple of questions.
Mayor Pro Tem Lewis, I had muted myself, so I wouldn't. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem Lewis.
Okay, and these questions are for our city attorney. And I read the hold harmless agreement, and I guess it's called force majeure. If I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it seems like everything is that they're held harmless towards the city. And in a lot of agreements that we have, the city has the same thing going back to the contractor. But that's not, I don't see that happening here in this case. So can you help me out to understand why we've kind of released them of any harm in this contract? Can
I interrupt because I haven't included Bill in this process yet? The contract that's included here was just tied to their scope of services, and I probably should have X'd it out, but I just left it in there. This is not the contract that we will be using. We'll be using the city's regular professional services agreement. So what we normally do with vendors is what we will continue to do. I did inadvertently include this, and I probably should have just X'd through it. But we will be sending over our professional service agreement to Mid Valley for them to approve use. If they don't, then of course we would come back to the council if there was any significant changes, but Bill doesn't know about this because I didn't show it to him because we have no intent of using this. We have every intent of using our standard agreement.
However, I can answer that question. Our standard PSA has mutual indemnity in it, and that's what I would expect to see in this agreement. So
that means they have to have insurance, their workers' comp
Mhm.
clauses, air and emissions, endorsements, and all those things. Okay.
yes,
Which
and
they
they
currently
would
have.
indemnify us for any damages that they did, and we'd indemnify them for any damages that were caused by some city activity.
All right, that was my question. Thank you
And
for
force
answering.
majeure is a mysterious Latin term that you learn in law school, and it's
Well, I looked it up on the internet.
We lost Mr. Vaughn. I've lost my audio feed.
Bill, can you
Does
hear
anyone else
us? I don't think that Bill can hear us. Can everybody else hear us?
I can hear you, Sonia. I can't hear Bill.
Okay, let
Can you
me.
hear me, Tom?
I can hear you, Miss Lewis.
I can hear you, Deborah. Yeah.
I'll text him.
I'll unmute for the moment.
See if he gets that text. I don't know if he has his phone with him. Bill, can you hear us? I think he could hear us. We can't hear him. He looks to be responding.
Is he using Bluetooth somehow?
You're right.
Let's see if I could do something on my end. Mm-mm. Well, did we have any more questions? I'd be happy to try to answer the attorney questions.
I have my question answered. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor, I have one more.
Oh, go ahead, please. Is that Mr. Jones or Mr. Lambert? Mr. Jones's face is frozen right now. And
Yes.
okay, so go ahead with your question.
Oh, wow.
Now we've lost him
So,
too.
Sonia, I don't know, in our standard PSA, does it have a force? Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Now, yes.
Okay, let's try that again. Sonia, in our standard PSA, does it have a force majeure clause in there?
No, I believe, like Mr. Vaughn mentioned, it's mutual indemnity, so it would excuse us from any, hold harmless anything that they did and vice versa. But not just specific to them. I don't believe
Okay,
that exists.
no, great. I was hoping that was not a clause that was going to be in there because under pandemics, especially COVID, it's kind of a escape-all to throw any of your delays in under. So I'm glad it's not going to be in there.
And just as a reminder, Mid-Valley is the one doing this. They're the ones that we're currently contracting with for consulting services for IT department. And they already have insurance, et cetera, and things like that in place. This is just in addition to their current contract with us. It's a separate contract because this specific project is not included in the typical services that they would provide. So it's all stuff that they're used to before they've already been through it. It won't be any different or any surprise to them.
Okay, I think the reason why, at least for me, why I'm so concerned with the contract right now is what we're dealing with our waste provider. And so just want to make sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
Sure, I understand.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
Anyone else have, sorry. Does anyone else have any questions? If not, Mr. Jones, since you pulled the item, would you like to make the motion to approve?
Yeah. Yes. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to accept City Council Resolution number 6302 as stated.
Do I have a second?
Mayor, I second that.
I have a motion by Mr. Councilmember Jones and a second by Councilmember Lambert to approve item E on the consent agenda, resolution number 6302. City Clerk Maloney, roll call vote.
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes. Thank you. Now, item F, Mayor Pro Tem Lewis asked to pull item F, and that's going to take us back to our acting Public Works Director and City Engineer, Mr. Bezesh.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, this item is related to the previous item, and it is as a result of that project, the dog park having been completed and now being ready for maintenance. And this is like any other park that is that would be normally part of the contract that we have ongoing for maintenance with Ronnie's services. And they provide a quote for this, and that was attached to the back of the staff report. So the number that you see in there, $4,500, results from that, and it is only for the remainder of the current fiscal year. And that's where we need a budget for it, and that's how we are attaching this to, or adding this to the current contract for Ronnie's to assume the maintenance role and continue to do that for the remainder of this fiscal year.
Ms. Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no problem with the contract. What I do have concern with is that there's nothing mentioned in here as standard with our landscape contract, where there's no feeding, no weeding, no maintenance of the trees, trimming, or anything like that. And we've been I've been talking about this for some time, as we have on and off talked about our landscape contracts, about our landscape and lighting districts and how wealthy they are or how unwealthy they may be. But that our parks, once they get planted, all we have is mowing, blowing, and that's it. The trees aren't trimmed. There are parks close to where I live where there's just large broadleaf weeds that are growing in. They just get mowed on a weekly basis, and that's it. So if this means sending this contract back to renegotiate a price, I would like to see something in here in regards to how regularly, whether it's going to be 3 times a year, twice a year, that this grass is going to be fed to keep it alive and healthy, what products they're going to be used to kill weeds out of the grass, and how we're going to feed and maintenance those trees that are in the park. So that's my concern for this contract, and I know that those qualities are not in this contract. So go ahead, Fred.
I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I'm not quite familiar with the exact details of their original contract. And if I may, I would like to ask our Parks and Rec Operations Manager, Joe Heim, as far as what is included in the current contract. Quite frankly, this basically obligates them to performing the same services.
And that's where
yes.
I have.
So that is, unfortunately, that is where I'm not up to speed on exact details of included in their current contract. Mr. Heim.
Yes. Can you hear me again here?
Mm-hmm.
So, Councilmember Lewis is correct that this would be the same as our other park locations in terms of services provided, mowing, blowing, weeding, those services. Additional services like fertilizing, tree care, things like that would need to be added on. The core services are provided by Ronnie's, by the landscape maintenance contract. However, to go beyond that is an added cost, obviously. And, you know, we have 40 something parks and as well as right-of-ways, medians, general landscape areas that would be quite an expensive endeavor to add those services, though they would obviously improve what we're able to offer. So that's what we're asking for today, is to be able to take care of the park as any other park in our system. And in terms of looking at extra services, you know, I would suggest to look at that maybe at the budget year for, you know, future fiscal years, and with the landscape contract to negotiate that with a new contract. However, obviously, we can discuss it.
And certainly that's a nice idea. However, most of our parks don't have, it's not specifically designed for dogs to be running and having a good time. It only takes a short period of time for grass to go sour. And I've seen it in other cities where, you know, a dog park was erected, the grass is beautiful, and after a while, you know, it's just the mowing and the grass has died, and it's not habitable for animals to have fun, or even for residents to be out there with their animals. So this would be a single item. I'm not asking today for the rest of the parks. I'm asking for this dog park, and I hope that our council members will consider that. We can't continue to just put stuff in the ground. I know it's expensive, and come budgeting time, when we're looking at budgeting for next year, we can think of some things perhaps to help us out with our other parks, perhaps a volunteer situation where we can get people in the community who want to volunteer by donating products based on what the city would like to use for our parks to help it be more healthy as far as our grass, killing off the weeds, and maintaining our trees. But this is a good start here for us with this dog park to do something different than what we normally do. And so that's my request today. And if it's the council's preference, I think probably we need to send this back to negotiate that in the contract. If they don't, then, you know, I've made my request and free to the council. But I really do feel we need to start somewhere, and this is a good start. This dog park is out in the middle of area where there's a lot of farming still going on. So you're going to have weeds flying all over the place coming into that dog park, and there's nothing to stop it. So that's my request on this contract, is to negotiate with some products to keep that grass green and healthy and thick, and to service those trees that are going to be in the park. Now, whether the city buys the products and gives it to Ronnie, or however, you know, we need to do it to have cost savings, I'm okay with that. I just want to see that we start having something that's going to be healthy, and not spend thousands of dollars doing stuff like this, building a nice dog park, and then it just goes to pot. So that's my request.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Staff, do you think that we could look at maybe continuing the item and maybe pursue this contract, this particular item in our maintenance contract? It wouldn't, if this doesn't look like an exceptionally large amount of money to increase. If so, you know, Chair would entertain a motion to continue with direction to look into maybe being more specific, maybe more expanded with the contract.
Mr. Mayor, we can certainly do that, and we can come back with a revised proposal and revise the language to the amendment that includes the services that Councilmember Lewis has suggested here.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Lewis, would you like to make a motion to continue?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Vaughn.
I would just like to call to your attention that you've already approved the dog park agreement, which you're now, this is just a lighting and landscaping district, unless I'm missing something.
Oh,
It's a general fund park, but yeah.
what was approved previously in item D? That was just for the completion of the construction. So
True, but
it will be
item
total-
F, is item F including maintenance of the dog park? I thought item F is just for the landscaping and lighting district.
No, this is for Ronnie's contract, which is the general fund areas.
So what item E is to accept the Los Banos Dog Park project as complete. That would be the construction portion of this project. Item F is an amendment to both the landscape maintenance's contract as well as the budget to fund that. Ag Sports Complex, which is the location of the dog park, is a general fund park. So in this case, it would be an amendment to the general fund in the maintenance account to fund those services, which are billed monthly. And this would obviously be for the rest of the fiscal year. So what was approved with D was the construction project. What is F is the funding for landscape services. And kind of go back. Of course, we can discuss with Ronnie what services, what we want to identify in terms of services that we would recommend in addition to the standard services to care for the dog park. What I would also say is that I'd like to do it as soon as we can because we do need to get services out to that dog park.
Yeah, I see. I can see that now. Just another comment is that the Ronnie's landscaping contract is up in September of this year, and I assume you will be preparing bid documents to bid out the contract, and you can include some of the things that Mrs. Lewis is concerned about in the scope of services for the new contract.
That is correct. Actually, just this morning, Joe and I were talking about starting the process and drafting the new scope. And as part of that, definitely we will consider the comments that have been provided by the council during the course of this contract.
So again, my only comment is you're accepting the dog park, but you're going to delay hiring somebody to maintain it. So
Correct.
As long as you know that we now have a dog park, and if you delay this item, you have nobody to maintain it until you renegotiate this part of the contract.
May I ask a question here? Would it be acceptable, Councilmember Lewis, to approve this amendment and for us to come back with the addition to their scope to address your concerns?
I have no problem with that if our city attorney feels that we have a legal leeway of doing something like that. I don't have a problem with that.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yeah, well, it's up for negotiation. And what I'm just concerned about a lapse in maintenance if we don't go forward tonight. If the dog park can exist for the next 30 days without this maintenance, I think that you can renegotiate this part of the agreement to include the things that Mrs. Lewis is saying. I'm just mildly concerned that there would be no maintenance until at least the next city council meeting. That's not a problem.
So basically, are you telling us that we can move forward with this and have a separate item come back on the consent agenda for the feeding and caring of
yes. So what would happen?
That's all I need. Yeah.
Yes. So what would happen is they would request a proposal for the feeding and the things that you're talking about for this particular dog park, and Ronnie's Landscaping would come up with a proposal to do that, that would then, if it meets with everybody's agreement, it would then be added to this.
So if I might, just for maybe a more simpler explanation, the council could approve this particular agenda item, then we could bring back another item, which would be an additional amendment, perhaps at the next meeting, to include those services that you're referring to, Councilmember.
And I will make that motion because I don't want it to be delayed and pushed out for months. So if that's okay with the mayor, I'll be happy to make that motion.
Please, Mayor Pro Tem Lewis, we'll entertain
Yes.
that motion with
Thank
that
you.
extra direction.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve consent agenda item F, resolution number 6303, with direction to staff to bring back at the next council meeting a separate agreement for feeding of the grounds for the grass and the trees.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis. Do I have a second?
Mayor, I'll second that.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis, second by Councilmember Jones, to approve item F on the consent agenda. City Clerk Maloney, roll call vote, please.
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Korea,
Yes, motion carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the input, everyone. We built a beautiful dog park, and we want to make sure it stays beautiful. That's the future. That's our future direction in this beautiful town. All right. So let's go on to the COVID-19 status update.
Excuse
And
me
for-
again, Mayor, if I may, did you approve items 7A, B, and C?
Yes.
I believe we did.
We did. I made the motion.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
Deborah made the motion.
yes, they did approve it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we did.
Lewis motion, Jones second.
Very good. Thank you, City Attorney Vaughn. And so now we'll go ahead and move to the COVID-19 status update. We have a special guest here today, but I'll go over to our city manager, Mr. Terrazas first, and then he can introduce our guests.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for the reorganization of our agenda to accommodate Dr. Yu, who's the administrator at Sutter Health Memorial Hospital here in town. The COVID-19 update, a standing item on our agendas. I think at this point in the epidemic, I wanted to invite Dr. Yu to give us an update. He's on the front line here in town. He's working the epidemic on a daily basis. So I thought there would be a benefit to the council and the community to hear from Dr. Yu. So with that, with consent of the council, I'll hand it off to Dr. Yu.
Oh, thanks, Alex, and thanks. I wanted to thank you for giving me this honor to be in front of you today. Congratulations, Mayor Faria, on your recent election. I'm proud to be here. Alex, I did send you a presentation. I don't know if you want me to share my screen. I can simply do that.
That would actually be easier. Let me make you a presenter. Sorry to interrupt,
great.
Alex.
Okay, thank you, Sonia, for responding on the fly. Thank
Okay.
you, Sonia.
Great. And then let me make sure with you if you are seeing my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
You are. Okay, I'm going to go into presentation mode. Hopefully that'll work. I'm always a little wary of these technological. Did that work? All right, we're in presentation mode. Excellent. All right. So I wanted to start off with, this is actually last month's presentation. I left this slide in to give you a sense of where we were last month. And I said that we were heading into for certain, a surge. So you can see on this graph, August, on the left side, new cases by day, you can see August. And you can see where we were at the date that I last presented at the City Council. We were in an uptick as far as number of cases, but mortality had not yet gone up. And if you may recall from that presentation, mortality typically lags by 2 to 3 weeks. Now, here we are. But I want you to notice something on new cases by day. The scale has changed. So you can see the August surge now looks like a tiny little hill, whereas the December surge is a mountain. And you can also see on the right side, mortality in California has taken off. So just as we predicted, the surge would be followed by mortality 2 to 3 weeks after, because that's how long individuals, when they get really, really ill and they develop what we call the COVID lung or the COVID pulmonary fibrosis and their lungs start to scar down, that's about how long they can go even on a ventilator with full max life support and everything that we're doing. It's about 3 weeks, and then they start to lose that battle. And we've seen that numerous times. Now, mind you, we've seen numerous successes that we won't necessarily talk about, because we get those people better and we send them home. But there have been many battles that have been unfortunately lost. So that's our present picture. And if I toggle between the two, you'll notice that cases by day and deaths, the top line is 14,200 a month ago, and now the top line is really somewhere around 40 to 50,000 cases by day, and then mortality has gone up from 150 at its peak. Now we're starting to hit into the mid threes and 400s as far as mortality goes. So the other part of that is that our prediction is, unfortunately, after this initial, what we'll call the Thanksgiving surge, which lasted much longer than we thought it would, it really only started to abate, and we can attest to that at the hospital, about 7 days ago. And then 3 days after that, we started seeing the Christmas surge. So we're starting to see another surge, and that surge is going to happen, as you can see, on top of the past surge. So we're not done with quite done with our patients through the Thanksgiving surge, and the Christmas surge and the New Year's surge are going to start up right about now. So next month, if you invite me back, I'll go over the numbers again, and you may be able to see that. I wanted to put this in here specifically. This is the breakdown by California and breakdown by race or ethnicity, and to point out that Latinos are much more heavily affected, and hence the Central Valley seems to be bearing the brunt of that. And we here in Los Banos are not escaping that. Even though we're doing better than the rest of the county, we're not escaping that reality. So the Latino population, the number of cases makes up about 53.8%, but the Latino population only makes up 36.3% of the entire population of California. So the Latino population is being disproportionately affected by this pandemic. Let's take a look at Merced numbers real specifically. So again, you can see here in Merced, the August rush or surge, and then you can see that peak on there for the Thanksgiving rush, and then the decline. So where we're at right now is we're about where we were at the peak in August. Our ICUs are full, our hospital is pretty full, and that's as high as we got back in July and August, and then we leveled out and came way down. Our ICU emptied out, but unfortunately, we're not seeing that right now. We're seeing that new patients are starting to come in from the Christmas surge and fill up our ICU. Right, our ICU right now has, at the beginning of the day, it had 5 patients, and now I believe we're back up to 7. So here we are looking at Los Banos in relation to our other communities. So just want to be clear, if you look at the graph or the chart on the right, and I've I've put in a red rectangle where Los Banos is, and that's a ranking based off of the over the last 14 days, how many cases per 100,000 population are we seeing? So you can see that Los Banos is unfortunately rising up the ranks. It was number 3 last time I presented. It has stayed on that course as the number 3 city in the county as over the last 14 days. You can see overall, though, it's not the number 3 county. You can see that, for instance, Winston, Livingston, and Delhi, if you look at the left side of that screen, and you look at cases per 100,000, that's over the entire pandemic. We're at 8177. So for a while, we were at the bottom of this list, by the way, when it comes to that number. But unfortunately, as the pandemic has, it's Mother Nature. She doesn't spare anybody in the end. She's coming after all of us. We have been on a steady march up that list. So just to give you a sense of where the hospital is at, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, at the beginning we were at 5, now we're at somewhere around 7. So this was I literally pulled this off the site, off the state site, and it was accurate at 7 a.m. this morning. But things are so fluid, it's not accurate anymore. Just remember, when we started off here, Los Banos had 4 ICU beds. We have expanded out to be able to take up to 8, and at times we've actually had 9 to 11 ICU patients. We've had to board them in the emergency room when we get up to that level. But we're constantly expanding and our capabilities. Of note, when we started the pandemic, we had 7 ventilators in-house. Today, we have 22 ventilators in-house in case we get up to that. At our peak, we've actually had 11 patients on a ventilator at our very highest level. We imagine that we are guesstimating that as the Christmas rush comes in, we may get as high as 12 to 15 ventilated patients. The other thing that I want you to understand and know about our reality is that COVID patients require a much higher level of care, much longer length of stay, because they require ventilatory care for somewhere between 7, but more likely closing in on 21 days plus. And we've had numerous cases. I can actually tell you with all due clarity that of my patients currently in the intensive care unit, not one of them is below 10 days on a vent. And that is a common theme. So this is also going to require vent shortage. To give you a frame of reference, typically in past years when we deal with influenza or other types of pneumonia, the patient might be on a vent for between 3 and 7 days on average. And that would be, 90% of the patients. Now it's just, you have to flip that. 90% of the patients are on vents for weeks at a time, which dramatically reduces your capabilities. In the San Joaquin Valley, for which I believe we are lumped into, as you know, California divided us into 5 regions. In the San Joaquin Valley, we are, it says 0% ICU capacity. What it really should say is we are at a negative percentage of ICU capacity because we've all expanded our ICUs. We've all doubled our ICU capabilities, both as far as vents, equipment, and nursing staff. But it doesn't go below 0, so I get that. And that's on that graph down below, available ICU beds by region. Our current state, we continue to have a high level of caseloads. Our ICU is deeply impacted. We are in a pretty good a battle on a daily basis to get staff, but I want to reassure you, we are getting staff. People are working double time, triple time, overtime. I had one staff member leave after it's been her 5th night in a row. She's coming back tonight. These are dedicated staff. They are in the fight, and they're going to stay in the fight. they're not going to give up on their patients. They've developed strong, both professional and, I will tell you, emotional attachments to our patients. I pray with our patients. I pray with our families. I go to the bedside, and I have great just compassion and empathy for what these patients and families are going through. So just wanted to tell you that we have, as of today, good news as well. We've received 5 nurses from our from the state as far as staffing, and another set of paramedics as well from around the state through the state's staffing mechanisms. So that's going to give our staff some time to rest and bolster our abilities right now to stay what we call in ratio, but also to continue to deliver the excellent care that we're doing on an everyday basis. Finally, an equipment update, and I put ventilators there. I know everybody's talking about that. As I mentioned before, we have 22 ventilators on site. I imagine our prediction is, and the details on this may be, too detailed, but I'll talk about it because, I've been a physician for a long time. We have some of the best ventilators ever built by man on site. We have servo eyes, we have Draeger vents. So we've been able to procure from our system, but also from the counties, thanks to their help, ventilators that actually can ventilate COVID patients. One thing you may or may not realize, the reality of boots on the ground, is that not all ventilators are created equal. There are top of the line, I'll call them Mercedes-Benz ventilators. And that's what I have personally gone out and sought and requested. And we have, I got to count in my head right now, I think we have 14 of them on site, ready to go, and being utilized, of course. Just want you to be aware of that. We've also been able to keep our supplies of appropriate personal protective equipment at satisfactory levels throughout this pandemic. We are actually in the process of ordering more what are called PAPRs, or respirators, for our staff. Those are those hoods that, when you put them on, make you look sort of like an alien. As well as gowns, gloves, and all the other equipment that we need to be able to deal with the pandemic. Finally, and I didn't want to spend too much time on this slide, but this is the county slide. As you can see, why I put it up here was, number one, you can see which cities, if you go to the website, are having the most number of cases. Of course, Merced leads the way. And if you really look closely at the chart there, you'll see that as Los Banos, we used to be on the bottom of the chart. Unfortunately, we've moved up a little bit, but we're still able to deliver the care we need to for our population. You also see that the positivity rate, as far as our cases have continued to climb in the county. And then finally, today, because of our zero ICU capacity in the county as well as in our hospital, the California Department of Public Health, in collaboration with the Emergency Management Services, or EMSA, CDPH, Merced County Public Health, and OSHPD visited us today. And their comments were that, we know who we are. We're pretty organized, and Christy, Marion, the chief nurse, and our staff run I hope a pretty tight ship. But their comments to us were that after visiting us and going through and learning how they might help us, is that we're doing an excellent job, and we're running a very tight ship here. Finally, I know you wanted a vaccine update, and I talked about this last time, that we are currently in phase 1A, where we are vaccinating high-risk healthcare workers as well as first responders. And so just to give you an update, here at Memorial Hospital Los Banos, we've given 279 vaccine doses to phase 1A recipients. We have not had any significant reactions. Nobody's grown a third eye. And a lot of us are looking forward to our second vaccinations this week, actually. We are working with public health on the future of our vaccine delivery system. As moving forward, there's been just a lot of moving pieces, and it remains an extremely fluid situation. But our goal is to be an excellent partner, not a good partner, an excellent partner with our public health and our first responders and all our local agencies to be able to deliver as much vaccine as quickly as we can to as many people. And I'll finish with this. I think I had this up last time. We're winning this fight for many of our patients. We're going to stay in the fight for 2021. We haven't lost focus. One of the things that I emphasize to our staff is don't shrink your dreams, supersize your courage and your abilities. And we have definitely supersized our courage and abilities. We are taking care of patients that we have never taken care of, is my understanding here at Memorial Hospital Los Banos, and really getting quite skilled and adept at that. With that, I'll end my presentation and open it up for questions.
Any questions from council for Dr. Yu?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lewis, I have a few questions.
Yep, Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you. Dr. Yu, thank you so much for your presentations. They're always very simple to understand and very detailed. So thank you for coming and imparting this information to the members of our city and to this council. When you said we're in the mid-mortality between 300 and 400, you're talking about just for Merced County, right?
No, I'm talking about for the entire state. So those are that mortality was 300 plus per day for the entire state. Most of it is occurring in, unfortunately, in Southern California and Los Angeles County. We have seen our mortality here at Los Banos tick up, and significantly so. We actually track our mortality on a daily basis. So in the last few weeks, we've gone from around 11 all the way up to 19 now. I do like to express that some of the perception is that everybody that's dying is really old and stuff like that. I will break that perception, because some of the people that I'm taking care of right now or have taken care of just recently, without this pandemic, they had miles to go, years to go. And it pains me to know how high functioning from their family they were before they entered the hospital. And we're doing our darndest to give them a fighting chance to return to that life.
Yeah, another question, with the fact that you're having to convert some of your ICU beds to beds for COVID, is the hospital able to see people that are having critical events such as heart attacks or what have you in ICU?
Yes, yeah, and so that's actually a critical part of what we're tasked with doing. So we've created other spots for non-COVID patients who are having, so for instance, congestive heart failure. We've had a plethora of other cases. I hope I don't sound like a broken record, but none of the other diseases decided to take a break either. We are seeing a regular census of those patients on top of the COVID patients, and we are able to, not going to jinx us, but we're able to meet the challenge at this time.
Okay, and I'm going to combine this question. I know throughout the United States there have been makeshift sites that have been set up for treating COVID patients, and with the surge coming on from the Christmas holidays, has there been any thought or a conversation with the county of perhaps using the fairground of Banyan Hall to convert that for beds? And with that, do you have any retired personnel that are coming back to help out at the hospital?
Okay, excellent questions. So yes, and Alex is part of this early planning. We had looked at various stages or various places. What we realized was that I think early on, if we have those types of acute patients, we're better trying to build it here on the hospital grounds, because it's as we went through it, we were like, oh, that's a whole new supply chain operation with a whole set of its own difficulties. We actually toured a number of facilities way back in March, April with Mason and Alex and a number of officials. And then we started planning, and we just realized that we were probably going to be better off if we took every last inch of space here in the hospital, because then you have access to nursing staff, and then we can stretch that staff better and make them more efficient. So on our visit with CDPH today, we actually showed them, we'll take over a cafeteria, we'll take over the boardroom, we'll put up another climate controlled tent and right here on site because we can muster more resources here and deliver far better care than if we go off site. Just to also answer you, the other part is that there is what we call an alternate care site in Porterville and Fresno as well. And we, if we get low-level COVID patients, meaning that they've gotten over their COVID, they're just not quite ready to go home, we're going to send those there to basically try and create space for those higher acuity patients so that we level load. And then the other thing that we've been able to do as part of Sutter Health, and one of the things that that's been very fortunate, I know every CEO and every chief medical officer personally. In fact, the reason why I was late to this call was I was on a call with them. So I can simply dial up a phone, which I have in the last several weeks, and ask them to take a patient, ask them to take something that a patient that has something that they have that I don't necessarily have. So we have that resource to pull upon. And then as far to answer your question about pulling in all retirees and stuff like that. So I have actually talked to retired physicians. We are actually, Christy has talked to nurses who have left our institution in the past and asked them to come back. We've gotten some of them to do shifts. I've talked to our physician staff, and they've actually pulled together as well. And they've shown up when it wasn't their time to be on, and helped out and just gone and seen patients and done stuff. So though we could use more resources, the entire staff is pulling together. One thing about a small hospital that makes it quite mighty is that we're all used to doing 5 jobs. And so when somebody else asks us to do a 6th, we don't think anything of it and we just do it. So that's been one thing that has really helped us pull together.
And my last question is, I've spoken to, one person who had COVID in September, and they had a second round of it again in November. I've heard on the news that some doctors say that perhaps the immunity for having COVID may only last at the maximum 90 days. So have we been seeing any people in our city or the county that you know of that are experiencing second rounds of COVID?
So I've not seen any specific cases of a second round of COVID, but we do know that, or at least we believe that getting COVID will, and your body fighting it off will likely give you about 90 days of immunity. It's probably longer, but it also depends on how strong your immune response was. And if you have other autoimmune diseases or other medications that you may be on that may interfere with your ability to develop a strong enough immune response to fight it back off when it returns, or should you become exposed again. So for instance, patients with lupus or Crohn's disease that are on chronic steroids, their immune system response will be severely blunted. They may develop an immune response, so it may save them from, having a really bad case of secondary COVID, but they may not have sufficient immunity to really fight that off. So I have heard about those cases. I've not personally seen a case of that yet. I wish, obviously that we see just in general fewer and fewer cases. And I know there's lots of controversy around the current vaccines and stuff like that, but I do see that it offers a significant light at the end of the tunnel for us to be able to get to and to be able to rise up out of this and return back to our regular activities and get our economies back up to scale.
Thank you, Dr. Yu, and thank you for answering my questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, Dr. Yu, thank you so much. I'll turn it back over to City Manager Terrazas to close out your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I really don't have anything else to add after that thorough presentation and Councilmember Lewis's follow-up questions. Just to add that I think we're fortunate to have the depth and resources provided by Sutter Health and Dr. Yu and his staff, and just want to convey a deep gratitude to you, Dr. Yu, and your staff for what you're doing. Again, being on the front lines, keeping us healthy, and fighting the good fight for us. So, thanks, Philip.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you. Stay well. Stay safe. Thank you for all you do. All right.
God bless.
Bye-bye. So now we will move on to our public hearing. And this public hearing is to receive public comment and consideration of Pacheco and Pioneer Road Complete Streets plans. If you challenge the proposed action as described herein in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described herein, or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. And so our public hearing to receive public comment and consideration of Pacheco Boulevard and Pioneer Complete Streets plans. Looks like we have two staff members we're going to go to, Community and Economic Development Director Elms and Acting Public Works Director and City Engineer Pezesk. So I'll turn it over to staff.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. So before we get started with the presentation, the items before you tonight, staff is recommending that the City Council adopt resolutions, accepting the Pacheco Boulevard Complete Streets Plan and the Pioneer Road Complete Streets Plan. They are two separate plans, although tonight's presentation, we do have them separated, but there are overlapping components of both of those plans, and that's why we have conducted those plans simultaneously with each other. I do want to reiterate that both of these plans are high-level planning documents. So they're to guide the city. We had a lot of input and community outreach as a part of developing these complete streets plans. And with that, they are still planning documents. There would still be implementation of these plans that would need to happen. Design would need to occur. An environmental document would need to occur as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Bruce Brubaker from PlaceWorks, our consulting firm that has helped us develop these plans.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be here. I know we've seen each other fairly recently. We had a study session in November to talk about the Complete Streets Plan. I do have a presentation that will be useful to show to you for your consideration and discussion prior to any resolution. So why don't you go to the next slide? Thank you. And I'll just say next when I'm done with each slide. So hopefully this presentation will be, high level and but in depth enough for you all to form your opinions. The project was a cooperative effort. It was the City of Los Banos and funded by Caltrans We had Merced County as a partner, as well as MCAG. We had, Stacy mentioned, we had several community workshops. We did a community survey. We had many stakeholder meetings. We had an open house. So the engagement was extensive. Next slide. So the project timeline, we've started the project in mid to late 2019. So we've been over a year working on the project, but we are at this final presentation stage. Next slide. The way we've arranged the presentation tonight is to show you Pacheco Boulevard Complete Streets Plan, followed by the Pioneer Road Complete Streets Plan, and we have a break in the middle. So if anyone has any questions or discussion regarding Pacheco Boulevard, which I'll do first, there is a spot to stop and ask about that or discuss that project, followed by the Pioneer Road Complete Streets Plan, and a spot to discuss at the end of that. The intention is that even though this is a single presentation with both these plans in it, the council will take up and have a resolution for each of them separately. So they are considered two separate plans. Next slide. So starting with Pacheco Boulevard, the objectives were to improve safety for all users of the street, to improve the traffic flow on Pacheco Boulevard, to make it a more attractive and welcoming place for residents and also visitors who mostly see Los Banos by going down Pacheco Boulevard, many of them. And then to improve parks and other public amenities. So these were the objectives of the plan. Next slide. You've seen this presentation or a similar presentation recently in the study session, so I've abbreviated it here. We'll just do a very high level approach on the presentation, but for Pacheco Boulevard, we split the concepts in the plan into 4 different groups or topics. And I'll go through these one by one. Next slide. The traffic flow and safety improvements are an important part of the plan and have much interest. Building on previous efforts, including, the MCAG Caltrans operational study from 2015 was fed into the thinking of this plan, but we arrived at a set of improvements that include streamlining the school pickup and drop off, to increase speed enforcement, street lighting, to make sure that the street is safer by looking at new visual barriers or prohibiting new visual barriers so that the visibility is good, and to potentially relocate ones that create problems, to consolidate driveways, to reduce turning movements, and to reduce left turn movements across traffic. Now, it should be said that we are not proposing continuous medians down Pacheco Boulevard, but there are a couple of places where we feel, in concert with Caltrans and city staff, that some medians will improve safety. So those are only a couple of spots along the length of Pacheco. Next slide. We're proposing aesthetic and urban design improvements. We've outlined ideas for streetscape furnishings, for improving existing parks, including Pacheco Park right in the middle, to add landscaping and trees where appropriate, and to add gateways or add to existing gateways and public art along the way. Next slide. We took a close look at pedestrian improvements. Pacheco does serve as a pedestrian corridor for many, many people. So enhancing existing crosswalks is important, but for the most part, we're looking at crosswalks that parallel Pacheco. We have looked at a couple of locations for additional crosswalks or improved crosswalks across Pacheco, but we are not adding additional mid-block crossings across Pacheco. That was considered. Improving sidewalks along Pacheco Boulevard and including in areas where there are no sidewalks to complete those gaps. Adding ADA or disability ramps, curb ramps where needed, and to focus the improvements, especially to prioritize and really focus first in the downtown area, which we consider to be Center Avenue, 4th Street to Mercy Springs Road. Next slide. Finally, bicycle improvements were a component of the plan as well. We thought that east-west bicycle routes needed to be provided or enhanced. And we have ideas in the plan for one to be a parallel route to Pacheco, north of Pacheco, going through downtown, as well as one to the south through the neighborhood there. And in the long term, there may be opportunity to have bike lanes on Pacheco, but after some study, we're not proposing bike lanes in the short term on Pacheco. Another important aspect of bicycle connectivity is crossing Pacheco. And so we're recommending improvements for north-south crossings, including in this drawing, this is Mercy Springs at Pacheco Boulevard. And then connecting to existing and potential future regional routes. Sorry, you can go ahead. That was the slide. Regarding implementation, we've gathered the concepts into 12 potential projects. We've done cost estimates for each of the projects. And following the acceptance of this plan, then the city would consider looking at those potential projects and prioritizing one or more to seek funding for. And so we've identified potential funding sources for each of the projects, and that could include grant funding programs, regional transportation funding, and other funding sources. So with that, I think that, we had a study session in November, as I mentioned. There were many comments from commissioners, from council members in that study session. I've summarized these in these bullets here from that study session. There were also public comments that we received for Pacheco Boulevard and Pioneer. So just for Pacheco Boulevard, there were some questions or comments about 7th Street overpass being kind of left out of the plan, and we did add a note that should be considered as a long-term plan. 7th Street overpass, pedestrian overpass, is a difficult problem to solve because it's quite an expensive project to fix because it's not accessible. So you need an elevator or ramp. So it's difficult to fix, but we did add it to the plan as a long-term improvement. There are questions and comments about drought-tolerant landscaping, which we added text about to ensure that I Street Pocket Park would provide traffic calming, which it would, to increase visibility to businesses from Pacheco. Consideration of tree heights at airport, which need to be controlled by the airport land use plan. Police and fire review, ensuring that they review any concepts moving forward. We added a note, making sure that U-turns are safe. There was a question about construction and traffic, and so we've added a note about ensuring that there be a construction plan for any of the projects that are considered. And then there was a concern about the time for public review of the plans. We did release it, and there allow for 16 days of comment from the public. And so that seemed to be a sufficient amount of time for public review. And it's gone to now to council commission, and this is a hearing at council. So Next slide. We had our council hearing right before Christmas, December 21st or 23rd. And the commission had some good questions and comments. So again, there's a concern about medians and police and fire vehicles crossing medians. So we'll add a note to the plan for that. Although I should describe that the previous public comments from the study session have been incorporated into the plan now. These comments from the Planning Commission need to be incorporated into the plan at acceptance. So if the council accepts the plan, then these responses should be included into the acceptance of the plan. So just a mention about the mechanism of accepting the plan is to make sure you include these responses responding to the Planning Commission if it is amenable to the council. Okay, with that, there is also a concern about traffic backups onto Pacheco if driveways are consolidated. So we will add a language regarding needing a traffic study for any future driveway consolidation. And then a comment that commissioner would like to see the commission would like to see the overpass enhanced, even if it's difficult to fix it. For pedestrian overpasses, there might be ways to make it more attractive by painting or adding decorative treatments. So adding a note to the plan or adding it as a potential long-term improvement in Chapter 4 is the response to that comment. Okay. The next slide is a discussion slide. So with that, I am happy to answer questions, or Stacy can help answer questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions from council regarding
here?
Okay, Councilmember Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Burbaker. Councilmember Lambert here. Just if you could clarify the enhancement of the crosswalks where there's non-street lights, how you're going to enhance those.
The crosswalks that are proposed are mostly, as I mentioned, parallel to Pacheco Boulevard. So they're striping. It's mostly striping and ensuring that they're higher visibility, so they're safer for pedestrians. And that also is for any enhanced crosswalks of Pacheco Boulevard itself would be primarily striping and would not include new mid-block crossings with signals or flashing lights or anything like that. Not in this plan.
Okay, at nighttime, is this like a reflective paint?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Brubaker.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Brubaker?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lewis.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes, I have some questions on removal of visual barriers. Is that all in a part of this presentation as well that we're talking about? I would assume it is, because I've got a lot of materials that, they weren't connected together, and because it's such a large packet, I wanted to make sure that this is all a part of what we're talking about.
Yes, it is, Councilmember Lewis.
So there was a section in here about identifying and working with property owners to remove and relocate visual barriers at an intersection where there's a high level of pedestrian and traffic. And we have a couple of those that I can think of, and they're demonstrated in pictures here in the presentation packet. So that's the proposal at this point, is to just work with those property owners to either reduce the size or reconfigure the size of the signage so that there's visibility of ingress and egress either into a parking lot or from a street going on to Pacheco Boulevard.
Yes, that's exactly right. So the city would need to take the initiative to negotiate with the property owner for either the relocation of a sign or maybe a change in a sign, or for maintenance of landscaping in certain cases where landscaping is grown too high. That would be the responsibility of the city. But what this plan does is identify certain locations and make it a priority to accomplish that. And Caltrans is fully on board with that and is very interested in having visibility improved at those intersections. And Councilmember Lewis, if you have specific locations in mind that you want to suggest, we can certainly include that in the plan as a priority.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is in regards to Westgate Park, and this is just for my own edification. And it talks about the Wilson Park on the corner of West I and Pacheco Boulevard. I always thought that we had a small frontage, that the city only owned a small frontage of that property, probably enough to incorporate a new sidewalk or something. How much of that land do we own? Because it looks like there's a pretty large development that's going to go on with this Westgate Park project.
Yeah, it's a high concept plan. So this would need to be, there's a lot of steps to follow before anything is actually implemented. It was our understanding that that is part of a city-owned parcel. I don't know that I can confirm that exactly right now, but it's something that we could certainly do and ensure that, because this is not intended to take any private property to develop. So
no, I understand that. I'm just concerned as to from Pacheco Boulevard to how much frontage actually do we have footage wise of that property? Because I've never been educated to that, and I always thought most of that was private property.
Sure. I can answer that, Bruce.
Okay, Stacy, thank you. Go ahead.
So, the Wolfson, there is private property, but that is actually along West I Street. The city has two parcels, actually, and those are all of the frontage along Pacheco Boulevard. The larger parcel is where the airport is located. And so what the plan shows of the park location, that is actually all city-owned land. That is indeed, in fact, city-owned land. So we own the very hard corner, the frontage of Pacheco and West I Street. And then there's a parcel that is the entire airport, and that is then also frontage along Pacheco all the way to the canal. That the city technically is a part of the airport parcel and is owned by the city.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jones, any questions of Mr. Brubaker?
No questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Well, we can go ahead. Do we want to take this Pacheco Boulevard item first, vote on it, and then move to Pioneer Road? Since they're two different items, would that be okay, Stacy? Or would you prefer that we move along?
I would ask that the city council, that we would move on with the presentation, open the public hearing at the end of the presentations and after the council has asked questions, so we can accept that public comment. And then if we could take those two separate resolutions individually at that time.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So then we will go ahead and move on to the Pioneer Road Complete Streets Plan, City Council Resolution number 6305. And we'll go back, of course, to Director Elms and City Engineer Pezesh.
I'll just turn it over to Bruce to continue on with his presentation.
Thank you.
Stacey. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Pioneer Road is the other plan. The plans were clearly done in parallel, but they are separate documents. So I will present our work on the Pioneer Road Complete Streets Plan. Next slide. The objectives for this plan were to implement the general plan policy to make an arterial roadway of Pioneer Road, which will be an alternative route for Los Banos residents, to make aesthetic and safety improvements on Pioneer Road, to plan for safe and comfortable pedestrian and bicycle improvements along Pioneer Road, and to minimize adverse effects of these improvements on residents, property owners, agricultural operations, business owners, and other users of Pioneer Road. So those were our guiding principles or objectives for the plan. Next slide. Again, apologies. I know you've all seen much of this work before, but I will reiterate that in our public process, we had really good feedback from community members and stakeholders, and that led to the current alignment of the roadway, as you see in this slide, which extends from the solid blue line is the short-term alignment. The dashed blue line is a long-term alignment. So I'll start with the short term, which extends from east of Merced College and east of Los Banos Creek, down to Pioneer Road through an existing proposed development in that area, Stone Creek development, to Pioneer Road, and then eastward along Pioneer Road to Ward Road and back up to Pacheco Boulevard and meeting Pacheco at the intersection of Ward and Pacheco. That's the short-term improvement. The long-term improvement being suggested by community members as a future, perhaps better bypass to start at Volta Road in the west and head down to Pioneer Road from Volta and connecting to the presumably already constructed Pioneer Road near where it meets with the West Connector. So that is the overall alignment of the roadway in our concept plan. Next slide. The plan cross-section has 2 lanes in each direction. It's an arterial roadway. It also includes bicycle and pedestrian multi-use path on one side, and it does not include the plan concept and the short-term plan development does not include a sidewalk on the south side of Pioneer. So in this section you see on the right side, any sidewalk or development along that side, which is primarily, it's mostly agricultural land right now. In the future, if it were developed, it would be the responsibility of the developer to provide sidewalk, landscaping, and so forth, sound wall if needed, on the south side. So the short-term Pioneer Road plan does not include that, but it does include the multi-use path on the north side of the road. There is a median, which would be landscaped for the length of Pioneer Road, and that median would accommodate left turn lanes at appropriate intersections along the way. The image on the right shows the West Connector, and it shows it integrated with the planned development, street layout of the planned development in that area. And there's a photo showing Pacheco Boulevard at the West Connector connection of Pacheco. Next slide. We did 3 visual simulations of what Pioneer Road would look like And this first simulation shows Pioneer at Ortigalita looking eastward. There's an existing photo at the bottom, small photo, with a visual simulation showing what it would look like near that intersection, which is shown in the slide. And the map on the bottom shows an arrow where the viewpoint is taken from. Next slide. Moving eastward on Pioneer Road, this is an image of what the road could look like near Plow Camp Road, which is an area that is close to some housing. And for that reason, where there is residential development near the road median has been narrowed to not impact the existing residential development very much. This is an example of that. I do want to return to this location because we did get a public comment about this location, and so I'll discuss this a little bit further in a few moments. You can see the image on the bottom of the existing location and the visual simulation showing the new. Next slide. And then finally, just past Mercy Springs Road, where Pioneer Road currently makes a T and you have to turn either north or south onto Mercy Springs, Pioneer Road would continue across the agricultural land there. And this shows the existing photo and the new photo simulation. Next slide. So, implementation of the plan. This is just the start of the process. This is a concept plan which is meant to inform and get community, input and stakeholder input and commission and council input, and then move towards design, engineering, and environmental work, which is already funded, and some of that work has already begun. It's funded through Measure V funds. For construction, other funds will need to be found, but I do want to emphasize that the initial design and engineering and environmental work does need to be done before funding can be fully secured. So it is a step-by-step process. And then our Complete Streets plan has a cost estimate for the near-term phase, and we have a description of potential funding sources for the plan and for the eventual construction of the roadway. Next slide. So from the November study session, there were many questions that came from commissioners and council members and a couple of public comments. How much property take will there be? That is to be determined exactly. Our plans do show, they are to scale, and they do show a scale of about 24 inches. Accuracy, so it's a pretty good take, but not an exact take of how much property will need to be taken. In general, it's not very much. There's an existing right-of-way for the most part for Pioneer Road, but there will need to be some property taken along or acquired along some of the properties along the way. Is there encroachment from existing properties into Pioneer Road right-of-way, the existing right-of-way? That was a question that came up, and we did some research, and we found, I think we found 2 locations where a fence actually extended over the property line right-of-way, perhaps one with a shed, but very few examples of encroachment were found when we did our research. Comment that roadway needs to accommodate large vehicles. We totally agree, and if language in there, we've actually added to that language to make sure it's clear. Will Pioneer be a truck route? It is not considered to be a truck route at this time, and we've added text to that extent. There was a question about the height of sound walls, which is undetermined now, but it will be determined with the help of future studies, including environmental studies. There's a concern about maintenance and costs. We've added notes about ensuring low maintenance landscaping and materials. We also added, there was a comment about having median pull-out lanes, and we've added that in a diagram of what that could look like. And so we've added that to the plan. Potential for left turns from local streets. We have added a note that it should be considered in future studies. It's a kind of a balancing act. It needs to be a well-moving, a free-flowing street for traffic. So you want to limit the number of light signals along the way, but there are some key locations where they should be considered. Maintenance of right-of-way purchased by the city but located in the county was a question. And that needs to be negotiated with the county, how that exactly happens until construction happens, at which time the city will maintain. But there may be some small amount of right-of-way acquired by the city, which may need to be maintained in the future. But mostly that's agricultural land that is not currently roadway, so that until construction happens, that is probably not going to be a large issue. There was a question about speed limits and what those are, and they will be determined in future studies. We're designing the roadway for a speed of between 45 and 55. But the speed limits is a separate process that will happen later. Undergrounding utility poles was a question. There will be utility poles remaining along Pioneer Road. Some of the utilities can go underground, the communications utilities and so forth, and they will be put underground, but the high voltage lines will remain above ground. There were concerns, public comment concerns about expanding the city beyond growth boundaries. So that will be addressed in environmental review, and we've also have a bit of discussion in a moment. I'll show you a slide with some other discussion about that issue. And then concerns about costs of construction and maintenance of the plan. And so the answer to that is that funding will need to be assembled, and that is clearly discussed in the plan. Next slide. Hopefully this is not too lengthy, but important to go through the comments from the planning commissioners at the hearing that we had 2 weeks ago. There was a comment about if the traffic signal on the west connector is too close to Merced College and if they should be merged. And the response is the distance is sufficient to have two signals, and they're far enough apart so that they won't conflict with each other. And so, and they're too far apart to really merge together. So there's a question about whether the property owner was contacted for the west connector, and yes, the development entity there has been contacted, and the majority of that area is part of the Stone Creek development, so they have been part of the process. Will there be use of eminent domain to acquire property? The city plans to negotiate with property owners. There is no plan to use eminent domain to acquire property. This is common in other similar projects to negotiate the acquisition of property. And again, a comment to ensure the use that agricultural equipment should be accommodated. And yes, we have clearly stated that. Next slide. So at the Planning Commission hearing, there was a public comment from the Grasslands Water District. They asked for a meeting with city staff. They had some comments at the hearing. City staff agreed to meet, and there was a meeting in the last week. with the Grasslands Water District, which consultant team and city staff met with Grasslands. And after hearing concerns and getting a presentation from Grasslands, and after consulting with the team, the staff really recommends adding the following language to the Complete Streets plan to address their comments. So I will read these out, and if the city council accepts the Pioneer Road plan, the staff recommends that these bullets, these statements should be included in the motion to accept. So the first is, in the development of the design for Pioneer Road, the city will explore practical solutions to reduce traffic noise and nighttime lighting impacts on nearby sensitive habitat in the Grassland ecological area east of Ward Road and south of Pioneer Road. Then, by widening Pioneer and Ward roads and installing utility distribution systems contemplated in the city's master plan, the city will not induce new urban growth in the area south of Pioneer Road or east of Ward Road. The city does not intend to annex new land for urban development or change its urban growth boundary as a result of this project. Lastly, throughout the development of the design for Pioneer Road, the city will engage with stakeholders who are concerned about the preservation of agricultural land and the impacts of urban encroachment on the Grassland ecological area. So this language was developed in concert with Grasslands. They have basically accepted the language, and staff also accepts this language. And I would mention that the Merced County Farm Bureau did have public written comments that they submitted prior to the study session that were also concerned about urban encroachment. And so I just want to say that this last bullet should include the Merced County Farm Bureau in engagement with stakeholders. Next slide. I believe this is the last slide. One last comment from public that after review, staff recommends including into the plan as part of the council resolution. This was a letter received from traffic engineer Keith Higgins, who does represent the interests of property owners of the Brandy family along Pioneer Road. And he asked that the following be considered, and staff recommends this be included. At the location of Pioneer Road between Diana Road and just east of Plow Camp Road, a standard cross-section rather than a narrow cross-section will provide a more substantial median landscape strip and provide the ability to have a left turn lane at either Plow Camp Road or Black Hills Avenue. This should be included as a preferred alignment in future engineering studies. The second part of the comment, so we would add that to chapter 4, page 411. And as well, there's a diagram showing that section in the plan, and we would add a note to the diagram that says future engineering studies should consider a full width cross section for Pioneer Road between Diana Road and just east of Plow Camp Road. It says the same thing, but it's on the map as well as being in the body of the chapter. And I just want to mention, you remember the visual simulation we showed near Plow Camp Road, and it showed a narrowed median in that location. This would essentially say that a wider median should be at least considered in future plan development. And so the city recommends that this statement be included into the resolution. So with that, the next slide, I think, is just the discussion slide.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question before we move forward on that last language that you have? You said that in the slides, that you showed us, there was a sample of what's proposed right now. But with this language, it would change. Do you have anything that you have diagrammed out to show council what it would look like?
Could we go back to the slideshow? Thank you. I believe the next slide, or maybe 2 slides, if you could go 1 more slide forward. And then another, go stop there. Okay, we have not redrawn this section. But this is the subject section. And you can see to the left, you see a full scale median. To the left, to the west of Diana Road. There is a turn lane shown for the first eastward part from Diana Road. But the median skinnies down in front of the residence there that you can see on the below Pioneer Road. It's the south side of Pioneer Road. And that was, so it would not encroach upon the property of that residence. Well, that residence is the property of the Brandy family, and the Brandy family supports this idea of the median being wider. So that would be a better solution in this area. So if you can envision the median to the left of Diana Road extending to the right all the way past Plow Camp Road, that would be the essential change. I hope that's clear. Is that clear?
So what I'm understanding you to say is that you're going to make the median the same width all the way to Plow Camp from the western part of Diana?
That's right. And it would have, it could then have a left turn lane incorporated into it for Black Hills Road.
Okay, so that, I think that was one of the discussions earlier, is that residents coming out of Black Hills would have to go all the way around, and I don't know if they would be have access to a U-turn, but would probably have to go into Diana and come back out, depending on what the speed of traffic is going to be on this road. So the east of Diana, those turn pockets will go away?
No, those would remain.
But they would remain.
Yeah, see, that is a full width median in that one section, but it's narrowing down as it moves eastward, and so would not narrow down if this note is accepted.
Okay. So the new proposal is to allow Black Hills to have access for a left turn.
Yes, with the caveat that there is more engineering to be done. This is a high level concept. This is a recommendation, and there may be some traffic issue or study that indicates that there's some other problem with doing it. But this plan would go on record recommending that if this comment is accepted.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And does that conclude your presentation, Mr. Brubaker?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If it pleases the council, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing and remind everyone that this public hearing is for both these items, the Pacheco Boulevard Complete Streets Plan and the Pioneer Road Complete Streets Plan. And City Clerk Maloney, do we have any comments for the public hearing?
I received 2 comments earlier today. The first is from Evelyn Pineda. She states, I am for the Pacheco Boulevard and Pioneer Road Complete Streets Plans.
Thank you.
And then I have a second comment from Rick Ortega. Comments from Rick Ortega, General Manager, Grassland water and resource conservation districts. Good evening, City Council members. On behalf of the Grassland Water District and Grassland Resource Conservation District Boards of Directors and 2,500 landowners they represent, I submit these comments tonight in support of staff's request for additional language to be added to the Complete Streets Plan, your acceptance of the plan to expand streets and utilities outside of the city boundaries and before the city undertakes its general plan update has caused concern for those of us who work diligently to protect the grassland ecological area and the surrounding wildlife beneficial agricultural lands. We thank the city for its long history of working with us to plan for future growth that avoids encroachment into the grasslands. By expanding streets and utilities along Pioneer Road and Ward Road, we fear that noise, lighting, and induced urban growth will degrade the quality of the habitat in the South grasslands and along the sensitive mudslough wildlife corridor. We are committed to work with the city in order to avoid or reduce those impacts to the greatest extent possible. We recently met with city staff and consultants and developed language that demonstrates an agreement by the city and the grassland interests to cooperate on this effort as the Complete Streets Plan moves forward. We ask that you approve the additional language proposed by staff regarding protections to the grassland ecological area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maloney.
And then, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I did
Yes,
just
ma'am.
receive an email right now from somebody that was watching online.
Very good.
And I would like to, it's kind of frank, so I'm just going to read it verbatim. And it is from Linda Gomes. This is crap, making the meeting when most are working. Question, why the name change? I would like the names of those that approve this measure. Is the vote legal? Is this an elected position? When is their term up? Why the secrecy? What are you afraid of? I will be asking these questions to the general public. Those you did not want to know. How much are you getting paid to destroy a Mount community who is paying for it? I do not know. How can you sleep at night, state your love Las Banos while you are willing to destroy it? Shame on you. And it was regarding this public hearing, so I had to read it into the record.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Maloney. If council, any council members have any questions of Mr. Brubaker or staff, Mr. Jones?
Yes, on the Pioneer Road, I'm still trying to figure out why it shows that there's going to be another signal light there at 11th Street in Pioneer. From what I heard, that was to help try to alleviate some traffic, school traffic that comes out of there. But then why do we have plans on Presidential East, Punching Page Avenue, all the way through to Mercy Springs? So the way I see it, we have way too many signal lights on this, and it's going to feel just like Pacheco Boulevard, but without the traffic. It's 1.86 miles out of someone's way to bypass Pacheco to go on Pioneer Road if we lay it out the way that it's proposed here. I'm just not convinced that this is actually going to solve any traffic issues. I think it's going to create quite a bit more, especially with all these medians that are going to be in the way of left-hand turns. So I would like to have some explanation on where's the data to to prove that this will be worth the $71 million that's being proposed as the build-out cost.
Staff, anyone from staff like to take that question?
Should I start, Stacy? Yeah, okay. Well, our initial plan did not have a signal at 11th. It was added after public comment pointed out that the high school traffic was great coming through there, as particularly at certain times of day. I would say that all of this is subject to further review, and we have not subjected it to full engineering. So this is a concept plan that is making recommendations, but there needs to be actual technical engineering done to determine whether that signal is appropriate or not appropriate. And I feel like that does need to be done. And the plan is clear that it is a recommendation only, and that further work needs to be done before it's actually implemented.
Absolutely. And if I can add to that, Mr. Mayor, it would be that future traffic studies need to be done, but also to warrant that a traffic signal would be even necessary there, but also in concert with the planning of Presidential East and the connection of Madison and Page at Scripps. So with all of that technical study being done, like Bruce said, this was a comment from the public during our outreach process. And so we have said we would look into it, but it still needs to be vetted and validated through the technical analysis process.
So we're still very early on in the process. We're still at 30,000 feet. We haven't lowered down yet. Mr. Jones, does that answer your question, or any further questions?
That'd be it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert, any questions of staff or our consultant? Oh, we can't hear you. There we go.
Not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Lewis, any further questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, remind everyone that this is a very early planning document. We're nowhere near completion. The idea is not to build a bypass. The idea is to ease the traffic, particularly for the local traffic, to get around Pacheco, so everyone can to get around a little easier. We still want to make sure that any highways we build, any roads we build, we make sure that they are within the city's sphere of influence, or more importantly, the city limits, so that we don't want to lose any sales tax off of the traffic coming through, because it is a very large portion of our revenue. By the same token, we're looking to the safety of our citizens and the health of our community. And it's a balancing act. It has been one that is in place. It's been going on for 60 years. I think that this approach is a very good methodical approach. We're involving everyone. I'm very pleased to see we get our Farm Bureau and our Farm Bureau and our grasslands and all our stakeholders are involved. That's the way we're doing this, taking our time, planning a long-term future. And so I'm pleased to see this go. And so I would, if there are no further questions, the chair would entertain a motion to accept Council Resolution number 6304, accepting the Pacheco Boulevard Complete Streets Plan.
Mr. Mayor, if I may add, maybe Sonia can pull up the slide with the additional language where staff is recommending that the council would accept the resolution with those with that additional text included for the Pacheco.
Yes, the responses to the questions asked by the Planning Commission. And there's the slide.
No, this is Pioneer Road. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's Pioneer. Pacheco.
Pacheco is the previous chapter.
Yeah, we need the Pacheco.
That's the one.
Mr. Vaughn, do we need to have the motion state the entire question and answer there, or just the fact that the responses have been included?
I think you can reference those comments as to be included. I don't think you have to read them all into the resolution.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vaughn.
So it would be something like, if someone were to make a resolution to adopt, it would be a resolution to adopt 6304 and incorporating the comments presented tonight in the presentation.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lewis, I'll make the motion to accept resolution number 6304 as read by title, also including the comments from the hearing of the Planning Commission on December 23rd, 2020.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Mayor, I second that.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis and a second by Councilmember Lambert. If there's no discussion, we'll go to the vote. City Clerk Maloney, roll call.
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria.
Yes, motion carried. Now we will move to the resolution for the Pacheco. Hang on, I said my for the Pioneer Road Complete Streets Plan, and that resolution is number 6305, and that resolution is to include responses to concerns of grasslands, the Farm Bureau, and Mr. Higgins representing the Brandy family. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to accept that resolution 6305.
Thank
Accept
you.
the Pioneer Road Complete Street Plan.
Thank you. And go ahead and in your motion, go ahead and include the responses.
I would like to include the responses that was previously stated in the slides.
Thank you very much. And then a second. Do I have a second?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lewis, I'll second the motion.
I have a motion by Councilmember Lambert. I have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis. If there's no further discussion, we'll move to the vote. City Clerk Maloney, roll call.
Jones,
No.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria.
Yes. Motion carried. 3 with Mr. Jones dissenting. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Mr. Brubaker, for this. Once again, we're moving very cautiously. We're moving very methodically because this is a very tricky, very challenging issue. And we want to make sure that we're going after it with a scalpel and not a sledgehammer.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone needs a break. I don't, but if anyone wants a break, we can take one. All right. If not, then we'll go ahead and move on to the item number 9, the speed cushion policy review. And for this, we'll go to Acting Public Works Director, City Engineer, Mr. Possession.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. The item that we have before you tonight is the professional services agreement with Hexagon Transportation Consultants, Inc. We are asking that the city council adopt the resolution to, 1, amend the fiscal year budget, fiscal year 2020-2021 budget by increasing the appropriation amount for expenditures in the traffic impact fund account in the amount of $16,000. And 2, authorize the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Hexagon Transportation Consultants, Inc. to conduct a review of the city's speed cushion policy in the amount of $12,000 with a contingency in the amount of $4,000 for unforeseen additional services. As a quick background here, I'm sure everybody is aware that in October, the council approved a request by Council Member Lewis that the staff conduct a review of the existing speed cushion policy, specifically the requirements for collector and arterial streets and how they might qualify for speed cushion. And staff later reported in November 18, 2020 council meeting that proposals would be solicited from qualified traffic engineering consultants to conduct the review that was requested. After that, we solicited proposals from three consulting firms who actually specialize in this field and have done similar types of projects in the past for other municipalities. And we ended up negotiating the scope of services and the associated fees with Hexagon Consulting, Transportation Consultants, Inc., for the amount of $12,000, not to exceed amount. They have done recent work for other municipalities. The most recent one was for the city of Gilroy, where they performed a full study and developed a traffic calming policy for the city of Gilroy, and it was actually adopted by the city recently. They will specifically review city streets that are identified or classified, I should say, as collectors and arterials and have fronting driveways, and look at what the requirements are currently for these types of streets to qualify for speed cushions. And as suggested here by the council in the past, and specifically by Council Member Lewis, part of the focus would be specifically on West I Street and Stonewood Drive, 7th Street. They have a detailed approach in their scope of services, the proposal that is attached to the staff report. And I'm not going to go through every item in general. Basically, what they're going to do is they're going to review our speed cushion policy. They're going to review our functional classification map for the city and identify the collectors and arterials, and also see how the city streets, the local streets, feed into these systems. They're going to research the speed cushion policies that have been adopted and have been in use by other municipalities here in Merced County and also in Bay Area. And they're going to develop recommendations for updating and improving our speed cushion policy. They will prepare a draft, and then based on the comments, incorporating the comments, they will prepare a final report and make one recommendation or one presentation, I should say, to the city council. So with your approval tonight, Hexagon can start the review process. And we anticipate that a draft report will be available for review in approximately 30 days. We are recommending that the city council designate one, possibly two council members to work with staff to review the draft report prior to consideration by full council. As I mentioned earlier, the report is going to cost $12,000. That's the fee, and we're asking for $4,000 additional in contingency for our unforeseen additional services. And that would be based on the review of the draft. Perhaps there are certain areas that need more focus, more study, and potentially this amount can be used for that. And with that, I would be happy to answer your questions as best as I can.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions of staff by council. Mr. Jones?
No questions, Mayor.
Mr. Lambert?
Not at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mrs. Lewis?
No questions, Mayor.
Okay, so then we'll entertain a motion, and with that, now, Mr. Vaughn, do we need to include, do we want to include the designation of council member or council members in the motion?
I would do it separately as a separate motion.
Okay, very good. So we'll go ahead and split those motions. So the first action item then, I'll entertain a motion to approve City Council Resolution number 6306, authorizing the city manager to execute the professional services agreement for speed cushion policy review services with Hexagon Transportation Consultants Incorporated in the amount of $12,000 with a contingency of $4,000, and adopt a revised budget for the fiscal year 2020-21 as it pertains to the Traffic Impact Fund account. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lewis, I'd like to make a motion to approve City Council Resolution number 6306 as read by title.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis. Do I have a second?
Mayor, I second that.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis. I have a second by Council Member Lambert to approve City Council Resolution number 6306. And with no further discussion, we will go to the City Clerk for a roll call vote.
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Faria,
Yes. Motion carried unanimously. We'll move now for, I would recommend that, and I'll go ahead and make the motion if I may, recommend that Councilmember Lewis, Mayor Pro Tem Lewis, be designated to this committee as its her particular area of interest. And I would ask that if any other council members would like to be on this designated committee. If not, then I will fill the second seat in that committee.
Mayor, I'll accept that seat.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Lambert. So then the motion will be, the mayor will designate Mayor Pro Tem Lewis and Councilmember Lambert as an ad hoc committee, correct, Mr. Vaughn? Is that what that would be called?
Fred, could you describe what the role of the two council persons are that you're looking for here?
Once the consultant has prepared the draft report, the role would be to review the report and make sure that their concerns are addressed sufficiently, and also if there are areas where they believe that there is a need for further study or additional content to the report, additional support for the recommendations might be needed. Those would be the areas that we would be asking the council members to help us with.
Okay. Do you consider it a committee or just?
We can call that as. That's a good question. You can call it anything you want. We can call it a. Honestly,
I mean, I guess
I'm not so sure it's a committee, but
review group,
liaison.
You could have
Advisory body.
that includes Mrs. Lewis and Mr. Lambert in the process of review of the document before the document comes back to the council, something like that.
Okay. So then I'll make that motion to designate Mayor Pro Tem Lewis and Councilmember Lambert to review the document of Council Resolution 6306 before it is brought back to full council. Do I have a second?
Review and make comments with staff regarding the draft document.
Mayor Pro Tem Lewis and Assemblymember Lambert to review the documents with staff and make comments and recommendations before it's brought back to council, full council. Thank you, Mr. Vaughn, for helping to clarify. Do we have a second?
Mr. Mayor, before I bring forth a second, I have a question that I'd like to present on that proposal. At this time, you're saying to review the documents with staff. Is the engineer or whoever is going to be working on this going to be included in on the review?
Yes, if I may answer that, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. All right, and I'll second that motion.
Okay, so I have a motion by the mayor and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis to designate Mayor Pro Tem Lewis and Ms. Lewis and Mr. Lambert to the advisory role in item 6306. City Clerk Maloney, roll call.
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much. This is part, we want to continue to include our council in their areas of expertise and in their areas and their passions. And so I think this is a great way to begin doing more of that. We had a little extra level of council involvement with staff. I think the relationship between council and staff is a symbiotic one. And when you've got that going, your city runs very well, very smoothly. So I'm very pleased to see that move forward. Item 10, appointment of commissioners to the following commissions. I'll go ahead and make the motion of the appointment, and then I'll call for a second. I have to do each commission separately. So item A, to the Airport Advisory Commission, I would move to appoint Mr. David King, Mr. Larry Leonardo, and Mr. Dave Anderson. So, do I have a second?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lewis, I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Motion by the mayor, second by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis. Ms. Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes, motion carried unanimously. Item B, I move to appoint to the Economic Development Advisory Commission, Mr. Chris Ford, Mr. Justin Collins, and Mr. Alberto Escobedo. Do I have a second?
Mayor, I second that.
I have a motion by the mayor and a second by Councilmember Lambert. Ms. Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes, motion carried. Now we're going to go to the Planning Commission, and each one of these districts will be a separate action item. For District 1, I would move to appoint Mr. Christopher Petticone. Do I have a second?
Mayor, I second that.
Motion by the mayor, second by Councilmember Lambert. Ms. Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes, motion carried unanimously. District 2, I would move to appoint Mr. Clarence Robinson to District 2 Planning Commission. Do I have a second?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lewis, I'll second the motion.
Motion by the mayor, second by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis. Ms. Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Lewis,
Did you say Lewis?
yes,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes, motion carried. I would move now to appoint Mr. John Cates to District 3 Planning Commission. Do I have a second?
Mayor, I second that.
Motion by the mayor, second by Councilmember Lambert to appoint Mr. John Cates. Ms. Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes, motion carried unanimously. District 4, I would move to appoint Mrs. Catherine Yulee to the District 4 seat on the Planning Commission. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Lewis, I'll second that motion.
Motion by the mayor, second by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis. Ms. Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes, motion carried. Now we're going to announce that staff is going to be advertising for 4 vacancies. Parks and Recreation Commission, 2 vacancies on the Tree Commission, 3 vacancies on the Measure H Committee, and the at-large vacancy on the Planning Commission, with the deadline to apply for those vacancies as Friday, January 22nd, 2021 at 5 p.m. So if you're interested in applying for one of those seats, go to the city's website and you can get all the information you need. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all the volunteers for the commissions. Once again, without you, we can't run the city. It takes a lot of people to make this all happen. All right. Now I'm going to move to item 11. And this is to appoint a council member to serve on the selection committee for the following committee. And that's the Measure H Committee. And there are 3 vacancies, 3 2-year terms expiring December 31st, 2022. And I would move to appoint Councilmember Lewis to that seat. Do I have a second?
Mayor, I'll second that motion.
Motion by the mayor, second by Mr. Lambert, to appoint Councilmember Lewis to that committee. Ms. Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes. Motion carried. Here we have a couple of more appointments here. We have the appointment of a city council member to serve on the city's Economic Development Advisory Commission, the EDAC. Do I have any council members? And this is just one council member, correct, Ms. Melanie?
Yes, Councilmember Veronica Johnson Santos sat on this committee, and currently also Brett Jones serves on the committee. So we just need one more council member to take
Okay.
Councilmember Jones.
Okay.
Santos.
Councilman Johnson Santos' place. Very good, thank you. Mr. Lambert or Mrs. Lewis, would either of you be interested in serving on the EDAC?
Mayor, I'm interested.
Oh, very good. Then I will go ahead and make the recommendation. I would move to appoint Councilmember Lambert to serve on the city's Economic Development Advisory Commission. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Lewis, I'll second that motion.
Motion by the mayor, second by Mayor Pro Tem Lewis. Ms. Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes. Motion carried unanimously. Next item is appointment of a city council member to the Merced County Association of Governments Governing Board. And I'm going to make the motion to appoint the mayor as the city's representative and the mayor pro tem as the alternate. And this is to represent the city at MCAG Board of Directors. Do I have a second?
Yes,
Mayor,
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, thank you. So I have a motion by the mayor, a second by Councilmember Jones to appoint the mayor and the mayor pro tem as the MCAG representative and alternate. Ms. Maloney?
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria,
Yes, motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we move on to item 14. This is to fill the City of Los Banos City Council member vacancy, District 2. The seat left empty when I was elected to the mayor's seat. And for that, we will go to City Attorney Vaughn. Mr. Vaughn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, those at home that are listening. This is a continuation of our last meeting where we discussed moving forward with the appointment process. Since that meeting, the vacancy was advertised in various places, newspaper, print, website, so on and so forth. The application process closed yesterday at noon, and we received 6 applications prior to the deadline. The city clerk has vetted those applications in terms of confirming that all of those folks are current registered voters within District 2. I'll just read out their names. I believe that the city clerk emailed to all of you the completed applications for your review, as well as posted it on the city's website for public consumption. But the 6 applicants are Jean, in no particular order, Jean Lieb, Sonia Vasquez, Refugio M. Yamas, Elias Reyes Jr., Clarence Rob Robinson, and Eric F. Ramirez. So you have a fairly large group of people that would like to be considered for this seat. And so what we'd like to do tonight, I don't want to go over the staff report unless you have any questions about it, but I do have a PowerPoint with some slides, if we can bring that up. Next slide. So with that background, what we were trying to do tonight is get a sense of how the city council would like to proceed in terms of the actual selection. Now that we have 6 willing, warm bodies who want to serve the city, you have the unenviable job of paring it down to 1. And so we need to come up with a process for you to do that, and staff is here to help you do that. Just as a review, you have till February 14th to fill that position by appointment or pass a resolution calling for a special election. So we have some time, but we would like to not waste any time in case we need it. And so what I wanted to talk to you tonight about was staff's ideas on an interview process, a voting process, and our recommendation that this be done not at a regular meeting with all of your regular business, but at a special meeting. Noting that there are 6 applicants, to properly interview them and give them the time they need and the time you need, we're probably looking at, if you were to give them each 15 minutes, we're looking at an hour and a half to 2 hours of time. So we don't think that that's appropriate to cut that out of a regular meeting. So those are the 3 items we'd like to discuss tonight. Next slide. So staff has looked at a number of jurisdictions, and there are a lot of them that have gone through this and are going through this right now, and trying to come up with what the norm is for the interview process, keeping in mind that the interview process needs to be done in an open meeting, open to the public. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we're going to have to do it in this format, which makes it a little bit more cumbersome, but we will carry on. And what we saw throughout what most jurisdictions are doing is having each of the applicants present at one meeting, and by random order, have each of them give you a 5-minute presentation as to background on themselves and basically why they want to be a city council person. And then some jurisdictions, I would say probably most, allow time for questions by city council. And this is where it gets a little bit different in terms of what other jurisdictions do. Keep in mind, there's no state law on how to do this. There's really city has no ordinance on how to do this. So you have a lot of leeway in how you conduct yourselves and conduct these interviews. Just keep in mind, because of the Brown Act, we need to do those in a transparent way, open to the public, broadcasted, for instance, on this platform. So in thinking about this and discussing this at the staff level, we came up with a couple of ideas. We could have some predetermined questions and have those already ready to go and have those read to the applicants one at a time and give them a limited period of time to answer those questions. If we had, for instance, 4 questions with 3 minutes per question, we're burning up 12 to 15 minutes on questions, not leaving any time for any discussion. And in addition to the 5 minutes that you would be giving them to tell you a little bit about themselves. The other format would be that each of the city council members would have a question. And we're suggesting that whatever those questions are, that they be the same for each applicant, so that you're not asking applicant A the hardball questions and applicant B gets the softball questions. So whatever questions are going to be asked, if questions are asked, would be the same for each interviewee. And then we would suggest that the order of the interviews just be set by a random draw. The city clerk can do a draw, their names in a hat, for instance, and each of them get called up in the order in which she pulls their name out of the hat. And then, of course, the final alternative would be to not ask any questions. And then that kind of is open for discussion tonight to get a sense of how it's your process. If you want to spend an hour with each applicant, that's fine too, but it's your process. We just feel like with 6 applicants, we really need to conserve time, and you don't want to be spending hours and hours and hours interviewing these applicants. The applications, if you've looked at them, are pretty comprehensive. The applications have good questions and good responses. So as you study those applications, you're going to get a pretty good sense of what these applicants are about in terms of their interest in this position. So as a staff, we don't think that you need a big, long, drawn-out interview process to kind of see these people, kind of get to know them very briefly, fire a few questions at them, see how they answer questions under the gun, and move on to the next one. So we kind of like some feedback from the council as to what they think about the interview process, or whether they have different ideas. We believe interviewing all the applicants on the same day or the same night is appropriate, so that you kind of have them all in mind at the same time, and we're not piecemealing it from one day to 4 or 5 days later, the other batch of applicants. So our recommendation is whatever the interview process is that it take place all at one meeting. And that's why we want to kind of streamline it. If you have 6 applicants who take roughly a half hour, you're talking about 3 hours of just interviews. We're going on the 3rd hour of tonight's meeting, and I think productivity kind of starts waning a little bit once we get into hour 3. But I'll leave it up to you. I think this is an important decision. It's your decision. Probably the community is interested in who these people are, and so staff is certainly open to any suggestions or any consensus that the group has in terms of an interview process. This is our recommendation. if there are other recommendations, we can incorporate those into the process. So I'll stop there with the interview process and see if there are any comments or suggestions. Do you like it? You don't like it? Do you want to do something different? And go from there. We're looking at January 14th or January 19th as the days for the special meeting. And we're pick those dates specifically because they're before your next city council meeting, which hopefully you had selected somebody on one of the after the interviews, and we'd be ready to install that person on January 20th. So I'd like to hear from council whether they have any comments on that slide in terms of how that process could roll out. If whatever the process is going to be, I will commit it to writing for you, so you will have it in anticipation of that, so everybody can refer to it, and so everybody knows what the process is, and we'll provide that to the applicants as well.
And I know too, Bill, you might want to note that you have ideas for how they select them on the next slide.
This is just the interview process, and then the next slide talks about the voting process.
Do you want to go on and discuss that?
Whatever you would like. If you want it all at once, I can give you the next slide as well.
Let's go. Let's do the other slide too, and then we can address the whole.
Okay. So next
scenario.
slide. Next slide.
Please.
So, like the interview process, there's no state statute that says how you have to do this, other than you have to do it in a transparent fashion, and your votes have to be open and public. So there is no go-to as to how you do this. And I will tell you, it's a little cumbersome because there's 4 of you, and that's going to be a recipe for a tie vote. And so no matter what the process is in terms of whittling down these 6 folks to 1, we could reach a bump in the road where you're deadlocked, for instance, at 2-2. And so what we're trying to do is come up with a process that hopefully doesn't support that happening, but it could happen. And so there's 2 alternatives we think for you to consider. Again, understanding that there's 6 applicants. If you look at the 2 alternatives, and this would we think it should immediately occur after the interviews. While those interviews are fresh in your mind, you got a picture of those applicants, and you're ready to go. I don't think you need a week to make up your mind between interviews and voting. I think it's more transparent if it happens right after the interviews than having a lag in time. So if you can do it immediately after the interviews, that's our recommendation as staff. But there would be 2 different ways you could possibly do this. So if you picture you have 6 applicants, you kind of want to pare it down to probably a couple, so that it's easier to kind of vote. And so one of the ways to do that is to have a ballot, and each of the city council members places on that ballot two out of the 6 applicants. And what that will do is it will quickly eliminate a number of people from the running. And the idea is it will leave you with 2 applicants. Sonia and I and Lucy ran through the scenarios. There are some scenarios where you might be left with 3 applicants, but that's still in a manageable amount. 6 isn't really manageable. You could also all 4 of you vote for the same person, and you could have someone who gets a majority right off of that first vote. So what would happen we would do it by ballot. Each of you would place 2 names on the ballot. If one person got 4 votes, that would be your selection. And any person who got 3 votes without a tie, that would be your selection. If you have a tie and you don't have a clear majority for anybody, then you would go to a second round where all of the city council members would have 1 vote to either vote for, it would be either 2 or 3 people would be left at that point, and we would go until one of the applicants receives a majority of 3 votes or more. So that's one way of kind of paring it down so that you can kind of get from 6 to 3 or 2, and then have a second vote on the 2 or the 3, depending on how your votes go. So that's a very common way of doing it, and it'll give you a chance to kind of get it down to the 2 favorites basically, and then vote. The other one is maybe not as common, and that's just purely each council person has the opportunity to nominate one person to fill the position. You don't have to nominate a person, but we could have a situation where all 4 of you nominate somebody, and then we, in a random order, vote on the nominees until the first person receives a majority vote. That's susceptible to ties as well. So what would happen, practically speaking, is you don't have to nominate somebody. If everybody likes the same person and council member A nominates that person and there are no other nominations, you would vote on that person and you would be done. However, if councilperson A likes one person and better and council member B likes another person better, you could have 2 nominations up to the 4 nominations. 4 nominations is probably the worst case scenario because then it's going to be susceptible to a tie. But that would be the process. And then you would vote for each applicant randomly until one of the applicants receives 3 or 4 votes. If there's a tie, then it's time to punt and see if you can break that tie. Maybe come up with another process to break that tie. Hopefully there isn't a tie. So those are the 2 processes we think you ought to consider. Staff believes that A is the better process, but B could work as well.
Okay.
Next slide. Oh, there is no next slide, is there? I thought there was a next slide.
You're more efficient than you
that's
realize.
that's the interview process, and that's the voting process. We'd like some direction. We'd like you to whittle it down tonight so that we can at least adopt one of those processes at the night of the interview. Because that's how I envision it, is that you have your interviews and then we have a final vote on the process, unless you want a final vote on the process, the voting process tonight, which you could do. So
And also too, if they decide on a date, could they adjourn this meeting to that date specific?
We
Or
could,
would
instead
want-
of a special meeting, we'd have to come up with a date and a time.
Okay. Let me mark that here. Date specific.
Could we take a little break, Mayor? I got someone rapping on my door outside my office who won't stop. I need to stop that. Do you think we could take a little 2-minute break? And
Sure. You need 2 minutes or?
Yeah, I just wanted to see who's knocking on my door and won't stop. So
Okay. So we'll just take a 2-minute break.
I apologize.
No problem. I'll be right back myself.
Your mic is on, Mr. Vaughn.
Okay.
I think everybody's back. Brett Jones, are you back to the meeting?
Yep, I'm here. Never left.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so if we could go back to that slide on the interview process, Mayor, maybe we could start there. I'd be interested to know if anyone has any comments about what's laid out on that slide or any suggestions that work better.
I do have a question.
Go ahead, Brett.
So will we present these questions ahead of time to the applicants so they have some time to prepare, maybe a day or two before? I know that sometimes there's people that are good at doing their jobs, but they're not good at interviewing on the spot. So at least this time it kind of levels the playing field, gives them time to think about their responses to the questions.
So we thought about that, and we were going to leave that up to you. If you chose each council person asks one question, you could get those questions to the city clerk, and the city clerk could distribute them to the applicants a few days before. So I think I saw that in a number of other jurisdictions. That's how they do it, is that they actually post the questions. And so the questions already are out there, and the applicant kind of has a chance to gather themselves to answer them. So you can do it that way if that's how the council wishes to do it.
Should we have a meeting regarding the questions so we're not duplicating questions if one of us each submit in a question? Because I'm sure there might be a duplicate.
Let's think about that.
When I get the questions, if it's a duplicate, I can tell a council member it's already been submitted.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be a good way to handle it. So we could, if one question is adequate for each of you, and I limited it to one question because I was concerned about time. We ask, and I think one question is per council. That's 4 questions. That's probably that's pretty good and a fair number of questions to answer. And so
sure.
I think submitting them ahead of time is certainly acceptable if that's what the group wants to do.
Yeah, that way it gives them time to kind of review it and come up with the best answer. Probably prevent some possible rambling and and
Yeah.
just flat out errors. So
I think that's probably a good idea. So what we could do is, if that's what the council would like to do, is Lucy could send out kind of a deadline for you to get her the questions, and time for us to get them either posted or communicated to the applicants.
And it probably depends on the date that you choose to hold the meeting on the deadline for those questions. Because
Right.
mind you, we have a holiday on January 18th.
Because we would be notifying each of the applicants of the date of the interview, and at the time we notify them of the date, we could provide them with the questions.
how about by end of day tomorrow on Thursday, we have the questions over to Lucy for review, and then she can get them out.
I would like an extra few days. That's awfully quick because I need to review the applications and think about the candidates. And I was going to ask the mayor, you've been through this before. What was the process that you used before?
You're on mute, Tom. We can't hear you.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
I coughed. I muted myself out. I've watched one and I've been involved in one. The one I was involved in was back in 2006 and 7. And there was a process, but the process really broke down in the meeting. And essentially what it comes down to, all the processes in the world, and we're trying to make it as smooth and pleasant as possible. The reality is it takes a motion, a second, and a majority vote. And ultimately, in order to seat the candidate. So by going through this process, I think this is a very nice process to do. It's a very civil process, and it's a fair process. So I like the idea of these questions. I like the idea of the questions in advance. I'm not really too happy about how it came off back in 2007. So if we can make it a little smoother this time around, it would be great to do. So Mr. Jones would like to see be able to give the questions in advance, which I like that idea. Ms. Lewis would like a little more time to prep for that. And so in order to do that, we maybe let's look at that later date. Let's look at that later date for the potential date as the more preferred date. If that time frame is a little bit tight. So,
well, Mayor, if we had the questions by the 11th, we could still make it on the 14th.
Okay. All right. So,
and the 19th is, I don't know if that's enough time for Mrs. Lewis. It would be next Monday.
Well, I think what I was saying is that submitting the questions by tomorrow is a bit premature for me. I want to have the opportunity to digest the applications and the statements that are on there to formulate my question. The other thing is that, this is a really important interview to me, and to have 5 questions per candidate just seems to be a little bit shy for me. And I'm thinking, maybe it should be a minute and a half per question and allow us to ask maybe 2 questions per candidate. That's just my thought. So it's an important position, and I think we need to have the opportunity to vet it just a bit further, other than one question.
Mr. Lambert, you have any input on questions? Do you have some ideas on?
Well, I'm with Ms. Lewis also. I think a couple questions and then lowering the time period for them to answer the question. The minute. I think we could get through it a little bit. I do like a little bit more time to come up with the questions. I believe, like Mr. Banos saying the 11th, if we can get them in by the 11th, I think we could make the 14th.
Sure. And Mr. Jones, does that sound good to you as well?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, if you guys need the extra time, it's not going to bother me. I work fast, so I like
Yeah.
short time frames.
And the short questions, the more shorter questions is okay
Yes.
with you too. Very good. And so, we'll make that modification. We'll look at more questions and a shorter period of time. I do think we need to have a maximum time for each candidate, because one may get stuck on a question. One may get stuck on a question a little longer, and then they have to understand, like we do with our commission interviews, let them know, look, if you take a little longer on this, you're going to have less time on something else. Does that sound good to everybody as well?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think with, if we're going to give them the questions ahead of time, if that's what the council agrees to do, then, you know, I would think that they would have already had enough time to prepare their answer. And once that question's asked of them, to be able to jump on it right away and give their answer.
Okay, very, very good. Well, it sounds like things are moving pretty smoothly here as far as the question. So I think the question idea, Mr. Vaughn, I think we've got the questions pretty well settled. Then the
Okay, so if we could get 2 questions to the city clerk by the 11th?
What
or
time
sooner?
on the 11th? Is there
I think during the workday by noon on the 11th.
Okay.
That's Monday. Today's Wednesday. That's almost
that's
5 days.
Yeah,
That's 5 days.
2 questions to the clerk by
Mayor?
noon. Yeah. Yes, Mr. Jones. Is that Mr. Jones or Mr. Lambert?
It's Councilmember Jones.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
So we're proposing to have a total of 8 questions or more for each candidate or applicant.
Well, if we did 2 questions per council member, that would be 8 questions.
Okay, so let's assuming we want to stick with the number 8. We should probably come up with 3 or 4 apiece and number them in the priority order, just in case if 1 or 2 have to be rejected by Lucy because they're duplicates or they're too similar to other ones. So we need to have multiple questions. We'll just put them in order of what our priority is per council member mayor, and let Lucy have pretty much carte blanche and picking whichever ones are not duplicates and going from there. Because I'm sure we're going to have a duplicate on something.
I'm sure we will.
Or if you give me a duplicate prior to the deadline, I can tell you that one's already been asked, and that would give you time to choose another question.
And I agree with that, because this is our interview. It's not staff's interview. So if we give a duplicate answer, a duplicate question, then we have to come up and formulate another question to ask the candidate.
Yeah, and that's fine. I'm just saying over this weekend, just think of a 3rd and a 4th question so we're ready to go. So we don't have to add any more time.
Yes.
I don't have any problem with. I just don't want to be submitting a whole bunch of questions, and if she comes up with a duplicate, then we can submit that secondary question or contact her and say, these are my other 2 questions. Are they duplicates as well? And that way we can start clearing the board.
Well, and the sooner you submit your questions, the sooner your questions will be the first question asked.
Yeah, we understand that.
Okay. So each one of us will get at least 2 questions to the city clerk by noon on the 11th. If that's good with everyone, we'll move on. That sounds good to me.
Mayor, did you want to set a deadline, a time deadline for the interview, start to finish? Or a goal? I guess a goal.
Yeah, well, we're talking, if we, originally,
Maybe
your little
questions. 8 questions is probably going to take at least 10 minutes to answer, I would think. A minute.
Yeah, yes, I think so. You want to take that 5-minute introduction down to 3 minutes? Because that'll take 12 minutes off the whole process.
Yeah, I think, I guess someone can tell you, can highlight their application in 3 minutes and tell you anything else. And then maybe allot 15 minutes per interview. Total, and subject to extension at the pleasure of the council.
That sounds good.
Yes. If we extend for anyone though, we'll have to extend for all.
Well, it just depends. Some people talk a lot, and.
Yeah, but in all fairness.
But those are all evaluation points for us as well.
Oh, that's true, Ms. Lewis. That's true. So a lot of great ideas here.
What do you think about the city clerk or the mayor reading the questions to the applicant as opposed to trying to figure out which council person it's coming from? Or would you rather have your question coming from you?
Mr. Jones, how do you feel about that?
I think one person should be reading off all the questions just for consistency.
Okay, Ms. Lewis?
I've done a lot of interviews in government situations, and whoever asks the question, just like we do in our commissions, that person who comes up with the question should be able to ask the question, because you've already got that in your mind, and so you're thinking about it. And while the candidate is answering the question, you're formulating an opinion right then and there. And I'm not saying you can't formulate it by the mayor asking it, but when that council person is interacting with you, asking the question, that to me, that's also an evaluation point that they're able to communicate with each person on the council when that question is answered. And for me, that shows a sense of just being able to work, as a whole with everybody, and not have to just focus on the mayor, because they're going to be working with all of us, and they have to be able to communicate to the public as well. So again, that's an interviewing point for me.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert, your opinions on that?
I'm okay with that. With asking our question.
Each council member will ask our own questions.
As long as we keep it in a timely period.
Within the time frame.
Correct.
Okay, Mr. Vaughn. So we've got, Ms. Melanie, I think we've got that pretty well set. 15 minutes total per candidate. Yes, Ms. Melanie.
So we want to make sure that all the candidates are asked the same questions.
Yes.
So if they spend a lot of time on the first couple of questions, then we run out of time with all the other questions.
I think the mayor needs to be the moderator, or the timekeeper, or the clerk does, and we will spell out to the applicant that they have a limited period of time to answer those questions.
For each question.
For each question.
Okay.
They'll have them ahead of time. They'll have them ahead of time, so they should be able to fine tune it down.
And let them know ahead of time that that's how much time they're going to have, and then that's going to give us an impression of their ability to prepare, because you want, when people come to council meetings, you don't want people to come to council meetings unprepared. So it shows.
One last issue I wanted to throw out there, as I believe that all of the interviewees have to be allowed into the meeting at the same time. That's why we were doing the random order. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that the others, the last guy is going to have the benefit of listening to the other ones, but that's why we wanted the same questions. But because it has to be an open meeting, I don't feel comfortable excluding any of them from the meeting. So, and I know that's not a normal interview process, but I think we have to do it all in an open, transparent way, and that means we're not going to be excluding the other five, I guess. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
All the more reason to give them the questions in advance.
Yes. So yes, exactly, and that they all get the same questions.
Yes. Very good. So I think our question format, we're going to 15 minutes total, 3 minutes introduction. Each council member asks 2 questions, and they get 2 minutes from each one of those questions. Does that work out? I'm sure it's 4 times 2 is 8, and 3, yes. And you got an extra couple of minutes there to go between. Does that sound good, council?
One more thing.
Yes, Mr. Lambert.
And so, okay, if they're going to be in this, interview process with them, or are we gonna have mic control? This way, we just don't get in a debate back and forth. They don't start debating.
Sonia will take care of that.
Okay.
Yes.
I
Very
have a
good.
question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Ms. Lewis?
What would be, I know it's your preference that all the candidates be in the room, but is there anything legally that says that we have to have them in the room all together while they're interviewing?
Yeah, it's a public meeting and we can't exclude people. The last two that I've done, all of the candidates showed up and sat in the chambers, and they came down to the podium one at a time and went through this process randomly. And so we're just doing it a little different because it's on this platform, but I don't think we can exclude them from the meeting.
Okay.
Mayor, I have a question. So
Yes, Mr. Jones?
we're allowing 3 minutes per question. That's going to be 24 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes per question. 3-minute introduction and 2 minutes per question.
Thank you.
I thought it was a minute and a half for each question.
Well, if we go 3-minute introduction and we go 2 minutes each question, that's 8 and 3. That's 11 minutes, and then there's a 4-minute buffer with a maximum 15 minutes for everyone. I think a maximum 15 minutes, and we know where everybody's through in an hour and a half, and then we can deliberate after that. That's okay with everyone?
I don't know if the math works out that way here.
Yeah, because that's 16. That's
No,
19 minutes.
a minute and
Okay,
a
2
half.
minutes. Oh, wait, 8 and 3. So it's 2 minutes.
A minute and a half would be 12 minutes for the questions, and then you add the 3 minutes for the opening statement. So that would be 15 minutes.
We're doing 2 questions per council
Yeah.
member. I was still on 1 question per council member. So
Yes,
yeah,
but a minute and a half works.
Yes.
a minute and a half works. So
That sounds
a minute
great.
and a half. 8 questions, a minute and a half each. I still had the 4 questions in my note here. I hadn't put down the 8. Very good. So I'm a little better mathematician than that. But I had the wrong note. Okay, very good. So 8 questions, a minute and a half, 3-minute introduction. And
So we'll have to bring our egg timers.
yes. And
Okay, so
may need a basketball timer.
Yes, so Lucy and I will commit this part of the process to writing so that the candidates, the applicants know, and that the city council is all on the same page as well.
Okay, and everybody's good with the order of interviews set by draw. I think that's the only fair way to do that. Everybody's
Yes.
okay with that? Okay, very good. Mr. Lambert's good. Ms. Lewis good. Okay.
Okay, then
And then,
to
go
the
ahead.
voting process, the first thing to decide is whether you agree or would like to do them immediately after the interviews. I think that's the appropriate thing to do. I think it's more transparent that people aren't out and about talking about this. And so if we can do this all in one meeting, I think that's the preference, unless you get deadlocked. And then we're not going to lock everyone in this chamber for 6 hours if you're deadlocked.
And then burn white smoke when we get it right.
There you go.
So voting the same meeting, I agree with that. Mr. Jones, is that, you good with that?
Yeah, I'm just still unsure of exactly how we're going to do process of elimination.
Okay,
So-
Mr. Lambert, you good with voting the same day?
Yes, sir. I'm good with that.
And Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll plan to take the vote, whatever process we use, we'll plan to take the vote on the same meeting as the interviews.
So how we're going to do the vote is a little cumbersome because we're doing this virtually. And so the way we've done it in the past is by ballot. Every council person would give their vote by a written ballot, and then they'd hand it to the city clerk, and the city clerk would read them all and tally them and announce whose vote was what, because the vote has to be public. But we don't want the vote being made real time so that council member A knows who council member B's selection are, who council member C's selection, because we don't want to build in a bias to that. So it's going to be a little cumbersome, but Lucy and I have talked about creating a ballot that you will get ahead of time, and it'll be numbered and it'll tell you exactly what you have to do. You fill out the ballot, and the part that we haven't really fine-tuned is we think what we're going to ask you to do is over the chat is to announce your ballots, your votes to Lucy or to Sonia, but that you're to hold on to your paper ballots for the record. Does that make sense? So you would get a ballot the first time that would say something like vote for 2, and you would write down your first, and you would write down your 2 choices by name, and then you would submit those to Sonia or Lucy and hold on to the paper, and then we would tabulate those and announce how it turned out. And like I said, it's either going to turn out that you're typically going to have 2 to 3 folks left after the first vote. You could potentially pick somebody on the first vote as well. So if all 4 of you voted and had the same name on your ballot as one of your 2, that's probably gonna take it right there. Anyone who gets 4 votes is the maximum that they can get. So am I explaining that right?
Yes. Mr. Jones, is that format good with you?
I mean, I guess it's one of several options we can go with. It's not a bad option. I think it would, I don't know, I'd like to kind of see process of elimination just to see if there's anybody else that's going to hang in there until the end. So if we go through, say, one candidate at a time or one applicant at a time, we all vote yay or nay for that individual. We have little tally marks, 3 yays. Okay, we set that one aside. We go to the next one. If they get 3 yays, we set that aside. We go to the next one. If they get 3 yays, we set that aside. If the remainder 2 only get like 1 or 2 votes or 0 votes, we remove those ones. Then we go to the highest ones, like say the 3 that got 3 votes each, or 4 votes. If any of them got 4 votes, that would probably be an automatic yes. But if any of them tied with like 3 votes, then we'd go through and revote for whichever one may, at that point, one of us might jump over to another candidate. So I don't know. I haven't thought about this too much, but I don't know. Whatever you guys want to do on that is probably going to be fine with me.
So writing 2 names down on a ballot is going to probably eliminate 3 to 4 people in the first vote. And then you're going to end up with 2 or 3 for another vote. So if we did a dry run on it and a mock vote, and the way that it worked out was that it typically left 2 candidates. In one case, it left 3 candidates. In one case, one person was a clear winner by getting 4 votes. So there's different ways it could turn out. We just have to count the votes to figure it out.
Okay.
So what you want to do is you want to be squeezing that group from 6 to a cumulative top 2 or 3. That everybody, the top 2 or 3 are going to be the ones that got a lot of votes. So you want to eliminate the ones that got one vote or no votes. So by eliminating the people that got 1 vote or no votes, you're going to squeeze it down to either 1 remains or 2 or 3 remains. Maximum of 3 will remain. And then you vote again with 1 vote instead of 2 votes. And you should be able to, barring a tie, you should be able to do it in 2 votes.
Perfect.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Lambert, any thoughts?
No, I agree.
Does that sound good for you?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Lewis?
And we're talking about, could you bring that screen back up again, please? we're talking about, process A. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that would be my, preferable choice over process B.
Yeah, because what'll happen in process A is the higher vote getters are gonna rise to the top, and they're gonna make it to the next round if there is another round. There could be a clear winner in that first round. If all four of you have the same name on that first round, that's a majority right there. And so, but if there's no winner, you have the second round. There you go.
Okay.
Now,
Very good.
So I'll commit that to writing so that everyone sees what the rules are prior to the vote, and we can, if we need to fine tune it before you dive into it, we'll have an opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. So then alternative A will be the procedure we'll follow.
Right, and then Lucy and I will try to figure out how to do it virtually over this platform so that it's, it's as pure as we can make it, and then also by announcing who voted for who as well.
Very good.
There's a chat box on this platform that we can do private chatting, so we might be using that as an option.
Okay. Now, is that private chat available in the public record? Does that go in as we're recording this? Are those chats recorded into the public record?
I don't know the answer to that question. Do you know, Sonia?
So it depends on how we decide to do it. And I think that the best way to do it would be to send it to Lucy. And like Bill said, she just tallies it up and then she's going to announce it. So then it would be in public record that way. If you send the chat to me, what's going to happen is the whole world is going to see who you voted for before it gets announced, because my screen is broadcast over YouTube. And so we want to make sure we send that to Lucy. And then I think the best way to get it into public record is just for her to announce it. And she would at that point say, Mr. Faria voted for A and B and whatever, however we decide to read it out. But just to go on to get you familiar with the chat, and maybe something you guys can look at, the little bubble that just looks like you're speaking on the top right-hand corner. So what we need to pay attention to is there's a box that says enter your message, and that's where you would type this information. But at the bottom of that, it says send to. Now, if you choose everyone, everybody's going to see it. So you'll all see each other's votes, and whoever signed on, so the candidates would see that as well. So you want to be very cautious that when you click on that, you pop up and it says Lucy Maloney, and you send that to Lucy. If Lucy responds to you, it would be a private message. And you could tell the difference. If you bring up the bubble, it's blue. If you sent it to everybody, if it was an accident, oopsie, you sent it to everybody, it will be blue. If it's a private message that you just sent to Lucy, the bubble should come up pink. So it's just something I want to make you familiar with, because it does sound like this is the path that we're going to take. So you want to make sure that in the send to column, it does say Lucy.
Okay, very good.
So I just wanted to clear, everyone's vote will be announced as to who they voted for in each round. And then we'll tally up those votes and determine whether there's a second round or a winner in the first round.
Okay. Now, do we want to plan the meeting for the 14th? Is that what we're going to shoot for?
Or the 19th.
For the 19th. Mr. Jones, what's your group?
What time?
Oh, I'm sorry.
What time?
And what time? If I had my brothers, I'd do it earlier in the afternoon. But I'm sorry, Mr. Lewis.
She's gonna go get her
I
calendar.
have to go get my calendar.
Oh, all right, very good. Okay. Mr. Jones, is the 14th or the 19th? Do you have a preference?
Let's see, one sec. The 14th in the afternoon is fine. Afternoon, evening.
All right. Normal 4:00 time, same time as our normal meetings?
That'd be great.
Okay. Mr. Lambert, 14th or 19th, is either one good preference for you?
I'm okay with the 14th.
The 14th, very good. So we'll see if Ms. Lewis is good on the 14th as well when she gets back. Ms. Lewis, your preference, the 14th or the 19th, as soon as you get a chance to get into your calendar?
For either day.
Okay, so everybody's available for the 14th. So we'll go ahead and go for the 14th at 4 o'clock. We'll keep it at the standard time. I think is wise because that's, once again, transparency. And the public is now expects us to meet at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so it's probably wise that we do this meeting, the special meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, especially this momentous a decision. This is a very big thing. It's a very big decision and a very important one.
So we can notify the applicants immediately of the date and time, and when we do that, we can let them know that the questions will be posted on the website on a specific date, and that those are the questions that will be asked of them on the 14th. And then have a rundown, give them an idea of what the interview process is going to be ahead of time as well. So we can provide that all to the applicants either by posting it on the website or sending it to them electronically.
Okay.
I guess we're going to have to give them instructions on how to get onto GoToMeeting. So,
yes, and make sure their electronic machinery works. We'll take GoToMeeting. If you have an old iPad, it won't take it. As I can tell from experience, I got to update my iPad. It's bad enough that I'm a dinosaur.
That's from experience because we've been doing a lot of job interviews through GoToMeeting, and a lot of people use their cell phones. You'd be surprised.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Very good. All right. So staff have direction?
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Lewis.
In the interviewing process, if they use their cell phone, I mean, are we requiring them to be so that we can see them? Because on the cell phones, sometimes you just dial in a telephone number and we can't see anybody.
I think that's a good idea. I think they should appear.
I do too.
Yeah, and it's the app on their cell phone that they use.
Yeah, if they use a cell phone, they still have the ability to be seen. So when we do the interviews that Lucy's referring to, we do require that the applicants are seen. So yeah, it could be a requirement.
All right.
Okay. Very good.
We will give those instructions out as soon as we can get together, probably this week, and with the date and time give the applicants a heads up. And then, like I said, we will reduce this process to a writing for all of you, so that we're all clear on how we're going to do this. And then, again, hopefully there's not a tie vote, but we'll have to come up with a way to break the tie. If there could be a tie vote even through this process. And so we'll just have to figure that out. That's why we want to kind of start right now, so that if we need to do something a little bit different to break the tie, we'll have to do that. So
very good. So hopefully we avoid a tie and we don't have to go to an election. We only have till Valentine's Day, so we'll get it done. Thank you.
So if they select somebody on the 14th, then we would put them on the agenda to be sworn in on the 20th, right?
Correct. That was the plan, is to have them at the next meeting, if possible.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks for all the hard work, everybody. We will now move on to, we already had our COVID-19 status update. And so now advisement of public notices and City Manager Terrazas. Oh, I'm sorry. No report to the advisement of public notices. Now we go down to my next line, City Manager's report, Mr. Terrazas.
Let me make sure I'm not muted. Thank you, Mayor. As the council, just one thing this evening, Mayor and Council. As the council's aware, we had a presentation at the last council meeting from a representative from Republic Services, the city's contracted garbage hauler. What we heard from them and what we are all painfully aware of, unfortunately, is Republic Services is being challenged to provide the community, I think, sufficient level of garbage services. We were hopeful after the presentation that they would address their issues and begin to pick up garbage, recycling, and green waste on a regularly scheduled basis, like they are contractually obligated to. They have not. At the staff level, we have been working to evaluate the city's options going forward. So I just want the council and the community to know we are aware of the issue. We are working on it. We are actively evaluating the city's options, and we will be moving forward at some point with an option to address those ongoing issues. The level of service being provided is really unacceptable at this point, but like I mentioned, as we all know and are experiencing, but we are looking into it. We are aware of it, and we will be moving forward with some options and an option in the near future. And with that, that's really all I have for tonight, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Terrazas. Next, the report on Merced County Association of Governments, Peninsula Clean Energy, and the Measure V Committee. Well, MCAG, nothing too exciting yet. We haven't had our meeting. I was appointed by the mayors. Mayors met today and appointed me to the County Redevelopment Oversight Board, and the city still has property with the Redevelopment Agency, and so we'll be working on moving forward with getting that processed and done. Peninsula Clean Energy is a very fascinating situation because I learned, of course, that their goal is to mix the solar and the wind. Solar generates power by day, wind generates power by night, and then there's a great deal of storage now and they have to have land for storage. So that's all part of it. Membership in this organization gives us opportunity to get discounts and also money, grants and loans, along with our citizen discounts to possibly invest in commercial and capital projects. Something else that was discussed is there's a big push in the Bay Area to go to all electric. I know the truck company my dad used to work for, Yandell, they're going to an all electric fleet, and there's a big push to go to electric cars. And as soon as I heard that, I got in touch with the CEO there, Ms. Pepper, and let them know that, fuel taxes and sales taxes are a big part of our revenues. And so if cars are going electric, that's lost revenue. And the very next day, our state senator's office was in contact with the Peninsula Region State Senator's office to discuss that very issue, to protect the local economies from lost fuel taxes. So we're on that. The idea of clean air is a beautiful thing, and we will make sure we're dealing with all the dimensions involved. So very pleased to see that. And the Measure V committee, we had the Pioneer Pacheco project is primarily being funded by Measure V, and we had a big discussion on that tonight. So that's all I have on those reports on number 18. And so now we will move on to our city council member reports. And first on the list tonight is Council Member Lambert.
Nothing to report tonight, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Lewis.
Nothing to report, Mayor. Thank you.
And Council Member Jones.
Yes, I actually have a couple council member requests. Want to start talks regarding renovating the downtown sidewalks. It's long overdue. I'd like the city, Los Banos, to work closely with the downtown association to kind of formulate a plan. It's going to cost some money, and we have to figure out where that's going to come from. I know that we've sold a community center on San Luis Street that gave us a little bit of money that was, I believe, put into our general fund, and I hope that's still earmarked where we might be able to look at that. but I'd like to bring that onto an agenda so we can discuss moving forward with some new and improved sidewalks for downtown. New design, new shape, an all new downtown. So the other item that is really long overdue is we need to start a discussion on relocating the animal shelter, building a new one and relocating it. The current conditions and size of the animal shelter is, grossly inadequate, to say the least. And this has been something that's been put off for many years. I'd like to see this get going, try to identify a good site to at least acquire the land and maybe start looking at funding options to build this out. So I'd like to have this on an agenda coming forward in the near future. Maybe in the next several months, maybe we can figure out how to get that on there and get some ideas going. But we need to start discussing these two items here. And
Thank
that
you,
is all.
Mr. Jones. Thank you, Mr. Jones. So we'll look at getting those on council member agenda request items. We'll follow our procedure there, bring it to council. That would be great to see the animal shelter, all these things, downtown sidewalks. And if we can find money to make all this happen, it would be great. I have some ideas regarding raising money for the animal shelter, but I'll wait until the item gets brought to us. And because those ideas are going to be in a post-COVID world. Very good. And so then there are only four of us, and so that brings that to me. On my report tonight, let you know that I'm planning to begin delivering weekly video updates. Hope start in the next week or two. We're looking at formats and platforms. I took a look at them. Look at some, and I'll be discussing that with the city attorney and city manager to find out the best way to go about doing that, the best format, how long they should be, what we'll cover. Very important, very important. I had a very excellent phone call with Assemblymember Gray. He has a very strong opinion about homelessness. He really wants to address it and address it aggressively. So we have regular homelessness task force meetings, and he mentioned we may start looking at a regular time for those meetings. With his help, we've got Healthy House Program. Salvation Army is working with it and other nonprofits. We are up to 3 houses for the homeless. And then the facility built in Los Banos, 3 houses in Los Banos. Facility being built in Merced is what we call a low barrier shelter. You can look up that information. The idea is to make it as easy for the homeless to get services as possible and get them into either permanent if they need or whatever, direct them to what they need. And the thing about having houses, places for them, is we're able to tell the homeless, look, we have the place for you to stay. And so you can't, because of that, we will have, that gives us the authority to move them off public property and right away, as long as we have enough space within the region for them. And so we can get them into service. We take care of them. We take care of our citizens. And we appreciate everybody working towards that end. Thank you for all the hard work tonight. I think I'm going to need a motion. Is that correct, to adjourn to January 14th, Mr. Vaughn?
Yes, date, place, and time.
Okay. So Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn to a virtual meeting on January the 14th, 2020 at 4 p.m. to discuss for the city council appointment process.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. So motion by the mayor, second by Ms. Lewis. Roll call, Ms. Melanie.
Jones,
Yes.
Lambert,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Maria.
Yes. Meeting adjourned at 7:51 p.m. Thank you for all the hard work, everyone. See you next week.